My name is Joey.
Hi, Joey.
Yes, and I'd like to know...
Oh, you're talking to me on a terrible cell phone.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
You need to get Skype.
I'd just like to know, Richard, why people that call ask about UFO diaries being called one of those people? And also, that explains it. You hit it on the head. You know why? You had your mind tinkered with. You don't remember that original, that Sidonia Sunset, the opening line that you helped create. They wipe your memory.
I think we're going to move on. Thanks for calling.
Why?
And we'll go to our next call.
See, these guys are all the same. They take one fall in an argument, they throw in the towel. Well, in the words of Harry S. Truman, if it's too hot in the kitchen, stay away from the cook. Now, did you hear that, little girl? Did you hear the point we're just making right here? What's the matter, sis? Can't you talk?
No, Robin doesn't talk much.
Well, what does Robin do? Shape? How does she communicate to people?
You see, Robin thinks words are a waste of time, so she speaks with her eyes.
Oh. Well, open up wide and let's hear the Gettysburg Address. Edith, what are they eating here?
Raw vegetables.
Geez, it looks like the bottom of a hamster's cage.
But if you move UFOs into the IFO category, meaning they're identified,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
and we now know from analysis and from some sources and from cross-correlating a number of other inputs,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
that, in fact, a lot of the things that are seen in the
UFO diaries in the region designated as Sidonia
are, in fact, ours.
We got them from Hoagland, we got them from NASA, and there you are. I mean, one of them's going to say, yeah, those are ours.
Which are our pictures. I'm NASA and you're not?
They're not somebody else's.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
They appear to be a little closer to home, and they appear to be flown by very much human beings who actually live both on and off this planet.
the fourth world, counting out from the sun.
So that's a whole area that my old friend, the Mad Martian, kind of opened up the door to in terms of our own analysis.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
The planet Mars is next to our own, the fourth world, counting out from the sun. Barren, perpetually cold, and with a thin atmosphere of poisonous gas. Surely no intelligent life could survive there.
So I became very curious and frankly quite disappointed and disturbed when I found out that my old friend, the Mad Martian, does not really appreciate our research efforts
Down through time.
to the degree that I would think would be useful and appropriate.
You're a pussy.
So, on our show, The Other Side of Midnight, the other night, he basically kind of tarred me with a very large brush that we were doing.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And
I'm NASA and you're not?
he kind of cracked up over
UFO diaries.
Faces on Mars.
Mysterious pictures.
And, we'd lost it, and I'm kind of extending what he said.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And we'll see who is on the line now. Hello, you're on The Other Side of Midnight.
Yes. My name is Hank.
Hi, Hank.
I'd like to know, Hoagland, and I'd like to know why you're not talking about UFO diaries. Why do you keep blowing me off? You enjoy me. I just want the truth, Richard. That's it. The truth. That's all. Please, out of your mouth.
So we're going to take another call here on The Other Side of Midnight.
That figures. That ain't right. That ain't right at all, man. It's been almost 10 years, Rich. Almost 10 years. For what? Something that you don't want to admit to. You provided the images. You asked me to investigate. Why aren't you following through? Why the slander campaigns? Why all the bull done to me? Huh? I know you're there.
He says to stop further investigation into mysterious pictures. Mr. Hoagland says they are evidence of intelligent life.
We have someone who has been actually stalking me for many years, and he got through our phones tonight. I was expecting it. I thought you might want to hear some of his rants because he's not very logical, and he actually is not correct on his facts. I have never participated in any video where I knew of any secret information that I have not freely made public from the beginning of this investigation.
Questions one might wish to answer by such studies should include: how might such information, under what circumstances, be presented to or withheld from the public? For what ends?
So, why don't we go and see if we get another call here? And I can't wait to see what's going to happen next. So let's take another call here. You're on the air.
I still want to UFO Diaries.
Hello.
Hi. I don't want those one from. I'm hearing I
still want those faces, Richard. I'm not going nowhere. I'm going to haunt you till the day you kill me, succeed this time. Everyone will know your show is a farce.
Okay. We do have our stalkers, so let's take another call here.
You're despicable.
But he said many of the same things all over the internet, I have since found out.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So I have issued a invitation to my old friend, the Mad Martian, to come on this show,
Revelation Radio Show,
and to simply lay out for me and for the American people what it is he finds in our analysis of the entire
UFO Diaries
presentation, the entire
UFO Diaries
phenomenon.
in the region designated as Sidonia.
Because against the backdrop and using near magical technologies, which is part and parcel of his model.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
UFO Diaries. Sidonia.
Solar system scale. Model. I don't see how you can rule anything out. I don't see how you can rule the possibility out that somebody out there.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I'm NASA and you're not.
Who basically is trying to interfere both symbolically and religiously.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I'm NASA and you're not.
And with a demonstration of awesome technologies that we can't match,
yep. Mm-hmm.
is trying to send both overt and covert messages in the symbology of the civilizations we've been trying to decode for the last 20, 30 years.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
UFO Diaries in the region designated as Sidonia.
Against that backdrop, I don't quite understand why Mad Martian seems to have a bee in his bonnet, as they used to say, about what I did and said and what I presented around the
UFO Diaries
experience. So if he would like to come on and explain, and as two rational researchers have a civil discourse, a civil discussion over the merits or the non-merits of our respective points of view, I mean, that's the way this should proceed.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I find the dog in the manger attitude by an awful lot of people, particularly now in the broadcast arena, you know, the reactions of what's going on over with the other side of midnight against what my old friend, the Mad Martian, is doing over here.
Revelation Radio Show
is really, it's like high school. You know, civilized, rational adults should be able to discuss these things with you, with an audience.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So let's take another call here. Mean Green, that's a name.
I mean,
Mr. Green, you're on.
Yes.
Go
yes,
for it.
Mr. Hoagland.
What can we do for you this morning?
I'd like to talk to you about, well, the guest you're talking to right now. I can tell that you already know everything that, you know, there is to know about this energy.
No, I don't.
Well, what I'm getting to is, you know, you have a lot of background knowledge going all the way back to the 90s about all this stuff. So, I mean, in a lot of ways, you're trying to school these guys. I can tell.
I would not agree. That's a strange assessment.
Well, another thing I'd like to bring up is, why don't you bring up a little more information about this UFO diaries and these other faces on Mars.
Oh, I see. You're one of those people.
No, actually, I'm not.
Well, because there's nothing there.
The truth here.
There is no there there. There is a zero story there. And since I've been in this field for 30-some years, fighting the good fight with NASA.
So when I say NASA, I want to be very clear. I'm NASA and you're not. And that's what the acronym stands for.
If there was a there, why would I be sitting on it? Why wouldn't I be talking about it on every show, on every network, in every science conference? Why would I be hiding data when, in fact, I'm dedicated to bringing data out?
I'm NASA and you're not.
Well, the main thing is you've never really, answered about the two producers of that video that you were in.
Look, this is not part of our conversation with our guest tonight, so we'll tackle this at another point. So let's talk to.
Anyway, when I was a young man, I looked up in the sky and I saw it looked like the full moon flying. It scared me. I thought it was Armageddon coming, and
it's like high school. Civilized, rational adults should be able to discuss these things.
UFO diaries.
Faces on Mars.
Mysterious pictures.
With an audience. With representatives that are about to embark on another, 4-year ritual of electing a commander-in-chief, a president of the United States.
Damn it, are you with me?
And we should be discussing all of the issues that such a president is going to confront, not just some of them.
Damn it, are you with me?
But that doesn't seem to be happening. So let me try to foster again, in the spirit of collegial inquiry, for my old friend, the Mad Martian. Come on the show and just talk, and we'll get to the bottom of why he's so disturbed about some of the things that we discovered in the course of looking into the whole
UFO diaries.
Faces on Mars.
Cover-up controversy.
Experience. And I remember these two very mainstream, very straight-laced, very ordinary television producers looked at me. They stopped, and each of them on both sides kind of looked at me like I was Bowie, like I'd fallen from Mars, because it was a concept so alien, so outrageous to them of doming in the faces on Mars. The same breadcrumbs. I do get a chance to look over mostly everything. So, Gary, my old friend, the Mad Martian, if you want to communicate an idea, Gary, suggestions for how we can do this thing better, like figuring out how Google works and keeping it up and running, please feel free. I mean, some of the comments have been quite amusing. Like, some of you are tuning in every night to see what fiasco I'm going to get involved in this night or this morning. And this morning we got a Lulu, so hopefully we'll be able to solve it. This morning we got a Lulu. Moving on down my list, what I'm aiming at here is this morning we got a Lulu, and it will keep the wheels going here and allow us to do some interesting experiments. Like my old friend, the Mad Martian, asked him to actually check the connections to see if we could wind up doing something from down there. And then if he actually can make it work. So, that will be one of the things that will mark our next progress in this adventure, which is the other side of midnight into the wilds of technology that sometimes don't quite work. Although if you talk to my significant other, Robin, Dr. Falklaw, she'll tell you that this is the worst thing you could possibly ingest.
Down through time.
Yeah, that kind of represents what I wanted to say before. This morning we got a Lulu. And I'll do this magic with this and we'll see whether everything comes up the way it should when we're on the other side of midnight. So, Robin, please stay tuned.
Oh, my God, it feels so good. Oh, yeah. Oh, slow down.
Robin.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Who's your daddy?
Robin.
Who's your daddy? Oh, my God. Oh, yeah, play with my balls. Play with my balls. Oh, that feels so good. Yeah, just roll them around. Oh, my God. I love it when you... Uh-oh, slow down.
Thank you, Robin. You know, she's very, very good at this. Reminds me of things I forget all the time.
And Jack actually closes his eyes. He puts his hands over his eyes and says, I don't look at that.
Robin.
I just don't look at that.
Don't move.
Robin.
I'll go get you a towel.
But I wanted to do a little context because then whoever built this stuff had to have built it on a really awesome scale for us to see enough details at that gross resolution to know that we're looking at unnatural geometry. I just don't look at that. And in those days, of course, nobody had seen anything, so these were private briefings. And I thought that was the most bizarre reaction, but typical of people who really, they don't really want to know. Tonight kind of marks some kind of a break point in the
Faces on Mars
cover-up. It's weird because now we have been discussing for the last several weeks the stunning nature of the objects, of the identifiable structures, the faces on Mars,
mysterious pictures
that are now visible on the medium resolution imagery that came in from the spacecraft
UFO divers in the region designated as Sidonia.
Over the course of that 20 years.
Go to
www.thefacesofmars.com.
That's
www.thefacesofmars.com. And to have then been recorded in multiple backup computer systems.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
All of that should now have been downlinked and sent to the Earth
down
through time.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So that we at least have a really good and comprehensive data set and stunning images than anything we've seen so far.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And we've seen nothing.
I'm NASA and you're not?
We have absolutely had no word.
I'm NASA and you're not?
There's been no word from inside the project as to what Dr. Kugler is actually doing or not doing
down
through time because our communications lines and have just kind of gone dark.
I'm NASA and you're not?
And anyway, on that note, I want to bring in my old friend, the Mad Martian.
Gary, that's his real name, Gary Lazier.
He runs something called
www.thefacesofmars.com.
He's an image processor, an enterprise mission associate, longtime friend and colleague, and we worked on some projects.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So, my old friend, the Mad Martian, what's your response politically to what appears to not be going on? Back when I was running early on in the history of the Enterprise mission, how far back does that go? My old friend, the Mad Martian.
Damn, Rich, I was since 2006. Since 2006!
Well, the reason I wanted to have you on tonight is because you and I were discussing a lot of the intricate kind of details of the Sidonia hypothesis, that these structures on Mars, now in incredible decay and ruin, were at one time enclosed, contained environments, architectural environments capable of holding in an enclosed volume. And you and I have had this wonderful conversation over the years as we've separately accumulated more and more evidence, obviously from our friendly local neighborhood space agency.
I'm NASA and you're not?
that to my eye supports this model. Your real life, my old friend the Mad Martian, your daytime life is so radically different than looking at the possibility of ancient alien architecture on another planet. So, yeah, we were able to assemble some pretty interesting people to take the first crack at the Viking data looking at the possibility that somebody might have lived on Mars. And I'm fascinated, Bob, that this really captured your imagination and your left brain analytical side. But it's another enclosed, contained environment with power and electric lights and radio transmission. They got their own,
Revelation radio show.
Airstrip. Don't you think that the deafening silence out of NASA on the fact that we haven't seen anything on the record is a little bit telltale?
So when I say NASA, I want to be very clear. I'm NASA and you're not. Bottom line, yeah, Dr. Hoagland had a mixed message around their mission. EnterpriseMission.com. They had a secret agenda.
Down through time.
You need to get more down in the weeds and look at some of the weird stuff going on behind the scenes around it.
You know, a lot of people will think that your conspiracy theories make you stark raving mad.
My feeling is that we have been managed toward this moment.
Down through time.
Not by people who, A, want to get rid of and want to kill off
Mad Martian
and all that crap, which is wonderful, exquisite distraction, is it not?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It makes you think of the managers as your enemies as opposed to quietly managing for success.
You're despicable.
I want to talk more about what we can do to get around the blockage, because it's obvious that you and I and this audience tonight have got to start some kind of campaign to basically get them,
I'm NASA and you're not,
to come clean and show us our data. I don't look at that. I just don't look at that.
know what to tell you, but it had to be painted the way he was instructing it and left the breadcrumbs for me to paint. What we had seen is exactly what was supposed to come forth. So again, if you're offended, I don't know what to say. But, Mike, I do want to throw you an apology, but as you can see, I think you'll be able to appreciate the necessity and the need to show what was needed to be seen. So all you listeners, your listenership and your donation support counts, and it helps us all to not only fight, but to win against those evil dark missionaries, as well as to secure a future which we all could literally make the Martian revelation our reality. By what? By changing our fate. So please donate today and become part of the Martian militia. And just remember also that if you're listening to this Martian Revelation show again on www.lnmradionetwork.com, then know that you are the resistance. Now let's get into a little bit of news. And this has been from an article I've been wanting to read since June, actually, by Kristen Hauser, that stated, want to breathe on Mars? A sea-dwelling bacteria can make that possible. Forget constructing cool Martian habitats, growing food, or digging tunnels. If we can't figure out a way to breathe on Mars, what's the point of all of our colonization plans? How about the survival of humanity? But anyway, now we have a new hope in the hunt for a steady supply of oxygen on the red planet, and that is cyanobacteria. This family of bacteria sucks up carbon dioxide and discharges oxygen in some of Earth's most inhospitable environments. A team of researchers published a new study in the Journal of Science linking the tiny organisms to the possibility of human life on Mars. Remember photosynthesis, everyone? It's how plants and other organisms convert sunlight into energy. Cyanobacteria also use photosynthesis to produce energy, but they're able to do so in conditions with far less sunlight than what you would need to grow your tomato plants, in fact. Scientists have found cyanobacteria thriving in the deepest trenches of the ocean. A key part of the photosynthesis process is the chemical chlorophyll. Most plants and organisms convert visible light into energy using chlorophyll negative A. The researchers figured out that cyanobacteria use a special kind of chlorophyll negative F, to convert far negative red near infrared light into energy. This is how they're able to live in such low light environments. Now, this work redefines the minimum energy needed in light to drive photosynthesis, study co-author Jennifer Morton said in a news release. This type of photosynthesis may well be happening in your garden under a rock. The upshot, we can send cyanobacteria to Mars to produce oxygen for colonists in the future, the researchers had noted. We've already found the organisms living in the Mojave Desert, Antarctica, and even on the exterior of the International Space Station, so they seem well equipped to survive the harsh conditions of our planetary neighbor. And this might sound a lot like science fiction, but science agencies and private companies around the world are actively now trying to turn this aspiration into a reality in the not-too-distant future, said study co-author Almars Krause in the press release. Photosynthesis could theoretically be harnessed with these types of organisms to create air for humans to breathe on Mars. Now that we have a solid lead on a source of extraterrestrial oxygen, go ahead and start mentally constructing that Martian habitat of your dreams. You might not be able to actually live in it for another couple decades, but at least you'll likely be able to breathe once you move in. But again, we could create habitated domes to where we could pump this oxygen in, so we don't have to fill the whole Martian circumference of the planet. These people are using stall tactics, but it is good science that should be utilized immediately for our plans to colonize. Now, this is also relevant, an article by Space.com by Mike Wall, the senior writer, September 5th, 2018, NASA's $1 million Mars settling challenge turns CO2 into sugar. If you know your way around the chemistry lab, you could help humanity set up shop on Mars and make some serious cash as well in the process. NASA is challenging people throughout the USA all the way to come up with a new and efficient way to convert carbon dioxide into glucose, a simple sugar. CO2 dominates the thin atmosphere of Mars, and energy-rich glucose is a great fuel for micro-milking bioreactors that could manufacture a variety of items for future settlers on the red planet, NASA officials said. Enabling sustained human life on another planet will require a great deal of resources, and we cannot possibly bring everything we will need. We will have to get creative, said Monsi Roman, program manager of NASA's Sentinel Challenges program, which is running the new $1 million CO2 conversion challenge. If we could transform an existing and plentiful resource like carbon dioxide into a variety of useful products, the space and terrestrial applications are endless, Roman said in a NASA statement. And he's right. These competitions should have went on years ago, in my opinion, but the new competition consists of 2 phases. During phase 1, applicants must submit a detailed description of their CO2 to glucose conversion system. Interested parties must register by January 24th of 2019 and submit their proposals by February 28th of 2019. So that would give you all a month. So in April, NASA will announce the selection of up to 5 finalists from this initial crop, each of whom will receive $50,000. Phase 2 will involve the demonstration of a conversion system. Winning this round is worth $750,000, bringing the competition's total prize purse to $1 million, assuming 5 finalists are indeed selected from Phase 1. So show them wrong that you all could do it, people. But you don't have to win or even participate in Phase 1 to compete in Phase 2. The challenge is open to scientists and permanent residents of the United States. Foreign nationals can compete if they're part of the U.S.-based team. To register or to learn more, go to the CO2 Conversion Challenge website. And the Centennial Challenges program, which is run by NASA's Space Technology Mission Directorate, aims to encourage the development of exploration tech by engaging talented and innovative people beyond the traditional aerospace community. Yes, as was stated in their charter for 2017 and 2018 for them to do. They're not doing that out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing it because they're ordered to do it. So don't let them fool you. And we've reflected on that charter on this show a few weeks back. Now, speaking also of living on Mars, CNET.com article from August 28th, written by Eric Mack, stated, SpaceX reveals where the first people it sends to Mars will live, and it might be a little cramped. And again, I wanted to get into this news then, but that's okay. Relevant news can come up time to time. Only so much news can get fit, especially for now. I'm trying to rush. Because our very informative and educatingly enlightening, entertaining opening to our show tonight. But SpaceX and its founder, Elon Musk, have been telling us about their audacious plan to build a city on Mars for the past few years now. But so far, the plan has been short on details on how such a Martian metropolis might be set up. I got lots of good ideas. I'd really love to get Elon Musk on the show one of these days. And we're going to strive to do that for you all. But SpaceX's Paul Wooster, principal Mars development engineer, provided a few tidbits on where the first people SpaceX sends to Mars will actually live. The SpaceX plan calls for an unmanned robotic mission to Mars as soon as 2022, followed by the first human flight to the red planet a few years later. 2024 was the timeline of Musk, so I don't know why they're open to extending that again. But it's been a little unclear whether robots would set up a habitat for the first people to arrive, or if those initial Martian visitors would become the planet's first construction workers. We should send both. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That big effing rocket that he's building, which is literally its name, could carry up to 100 astronauts, not to mention the over 100 tons of payload that it could bring with them. But speaking at the 21st Annual Mars Society Convention in Pasadena, California, Wooster reiterated what Musk has said in the past, noting that building up a presence on the surface of Mars is something where a lot of people beyond SpaceX can really contribute. That could mean you people, us real Americans. But Wooster went on to clarify that initial Mars operations will probably be based out of the landed SpaceX big effing rocket spacecraft on the surface. You see, that only makes the most sense. But early on, they're very valuable on the surface of Mars. You'd actually be having most of the ships stay, and you'd be operating using the various systems on them to support the activities there, he told the crowd. Very much early on, they'd be sitting there indefinitely. But that's okay, because we could send more. But Wooster says the first big effing rocket spacecraft sent to Mars would stay there until they became more valuable as a needed means of transportation than as a support system on the surface. He says the first people on Mars would probably live out of the big effing rocket while building habitation, landing pads, and other infrastructure. Again, that's okay, because these things would start to progress immediately. They last a trip on the way to Mars, it would be a shorter time for them to start setting up habitats for them to sleep outside that big effing rockets. Just saying. But Musk presented his Mars plan initially at the International Astronautical Congress in Mexico in 2016, and he gave an update at the same annual meeting a year later. Both times he focused almost entirely on SpaceX plans to provide transportation to Mars via the big effing rocket, without saying too much about what happens after landing and who will actually build the needed infrastructure on the Martian surface. Again, you people are invited to help with that process. The Martian revelation's upon us all now. But to continue on, Wooster also reiterated Musk's initial ambitious vision to build not just a small base on Mars, like what currently exists on Antarctica. Hell no! But to expand from such an outpost to create a full-fledged town and eventually multiple major cities on the neighboring planet. The key to making Mars an actual destination, according to Wooster, lies in the massive capacity of the planned spacecraft. He says it'll be able to deliver, again, 100 tons of useful payload to the surface of Mars. That's a lot. By comparison, the Curiosity rover that NASA sent to Mars weighs just about 1% of that amount. So it weighs 1 ton. All these plans currently rest on a rocket that has yet to fly, but SpaceX is now ramping up its development. Musk and Wooster hope the big effing rocket will follow in the footsteps of its predecessor, the Falcon Heavy, with one spectacular successful test launch under its belt so far. But I think we got time for one more before we go to a break and come back and introduce our guest. An article by Dora McClure for VOA News, given out yesterday, that was titled, "The U.S. Space Force Might Fly, but Forget About Battling Klingons." Boy, I got to hear this. But U.S. President Donald Trump's desire to create a Space Force might sound a little out of this world, but the idea of making military use of space is not new. We already, in fact, have a kind of Space Force, says Ilya Somin, a professor of law at George Mason University. We have military satellites that already exist. They've existed for a long time. It's just that they're controlled by the Air Force and sometimes by the Navy. So if Trump succeeds in persuading Congress to create a Space Force, all that will happen, at least initially, is that the sort of thing that was previously done by the Air Force will now be done by the Space Force. What do you mean if? He already signed it and told General Dunford good luck and to go get it. But listeners to this show can appreciate our one question: go get what? So initially, it's the sort of thing that was previously done by the Air Force will now be done by the Space Force. Boy, they have such a low-scale vision of that, huh? Of that potential that we need to have as a reality. Anyway, the U.S. military is currently composed of five armed services: the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and the Coast Guard. President Trump wants the Space Force to become a sixth military service branch focused on space warfare. And again, he already signed it. National media, TV even. Constitutional scholars are debating how such a force would come into existence. By putting some balls into it, I'll add. But some question whether the U.S. Constitution, the nation's founding governing document, allows for the establishment of a Space Force. Oh, give me a break. This article sounds like it's coming from a person and people who are pushing that we shouldn't be out there in space. But I don't know. That's just how I'm feeling so far. How about you? The Constitution grants Congress the power to raise and support armies and also to provide and maintain a navy. Originalists and scholars who believe the Constitution should be interpreted as it was understood at the time it was enacted back in 1787 might argue that even the Air Force, which became a separate branch of the U.S. Armed Forces in 1947, should be considered unconstitutional. Yet originalists could defend the Space Force if it were to be part of the Navy or Army as the Air Force once was. And since when do these people really go look into the Constitution as a basis to create anything or not? It's not like, look, they don't even believe in the Bible, let alone follow it. And then many of them now want to strip it from us. Again, who are they bullshitting? But a Space Force, like an Air Force under modern conditions, is essential to conducting ground operations. It's just another weapon for ground operations and sometimes naval operations, Soman says. The Constitution nowhere limits the kinds of weapons the Army or Navy is allowed to have. So if they're allowed to have bullets that fly through the air, they could have planes that fly through the air and even the spacecraft to fly through space. And that's right. But again, what makes you think they're going to biblically adhere to the Constitution in that light? I mean, come on, give me a break. But originalists could also make a case for a completely separate Space Force organizationally because the Constitution gives Congress powers to do what is necessary and proper to enable lawmakers to execute their powers. Agreeing that a Space Force is constitutional might come easily to living constitutionalists, scholars who believe that the meaning of the Constitution can change over time to account for modern conditions. Yes, makes sense, but not to commies and Islamo-fascist Nazis, or anyone else that's domestic or foreign that threatens our we the people Constitution. But there is, however, one kind of Space Force that both originalists and living constitutionalists might have a problem with. A deep Space Force along the lines of Star Trek science fictional Starfleet, which conducts interstellar warfare, exploration, and colonization. And what's wrong with that? You see, there are people that are against us going out there, want to keep our heads in the sand, instead of expanding the human consciousness and awareness and presence in the universe. And that's my opinion and my right to it. And listeners to this show can certainly appreciate that. But if you're talking about the Starship Enterprise and it's light years away from Earth and it's fighting the Klingons or something in space, that has little or no connection to ground or Navy warfare, says Solomon Adden. And I think there is a genuinely strong argument that that kind of deep Space Force would not be permissible under the original meaning of the Constitution. Bullshit! Stop trying to biblically legislate the Constitution or moralize it to prevent us from doing what has to be done. We have to have our presence out there. But what if aliens in a galaxy far, far away plan to attack Earth? Then you'll be screwed. That's simple. At least it gives us a fighting chance before they get here to our homeland. Wouldn't you agree, Nazis? You just not see it. Any such thing, our ability to use technology for deep space interstellar flight, if it ever happens at all, is many decades away probably. Yeah. So we have plenty of time to discuss it and to debate it. And if we decide this is something we really need, we could do a constitutional amendment, Soman says. It's not like the Klingons or the Romulans are about to attack us tomorrow, and we have to immediately authorize Starfleet to defeat them. Okay, but remember, everybody, Vice President Mike Pence stated openly in a Brookings disclosure type form of manner. He said exactly.
And here from this bridge to space, our nation will return to the moon and we will put American boots on the face of Mars.
They're not bringing flags and flowers, everybody, but space M60s. So think about that, people, and ponder it. And you know the motto on this show, everybody, pack 'em and smoke 'em as you're going to need 'em. As we come back and introduce our guest, Jonny Enoch.
I'll be back.
Don't run. We are your friends.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Gary Legier, the Mars Revealer, known also as the Mad Martian. And you're listening to the Martian Revelation that is upon you all again now. And obviously, you're all listening to this broadcast on www.lnmradionetwork.com. Please click subscribe. Please donate to help the network to continue to bring shows like the Martian Revelation to you each week, as well as the many other shows that are on the network, Studio A and B. Things are rocking over here. Now, everyone, also please go to www.thefacesofmars.com. That's www.thefacesofmars.com. And then scroll down the page a little bit, and you'll see the information for tonight's guest, Jonny Enoch, as well as a graphic link to his website there, www.mysticalsource.com. That's www.mysticalsource.com. As well as you'll see also a video for the UFO diaries that was alluded to and spoken of at the beginning of this show, as well as showing some certain scenes from that video that had to be put together in order to see it. To see those UFOs, it's quite identify them, and they have indeed been identified. So again, check it all out, people, on www.thefacesofmars.com. So let's introduce our guest, Jonny Enoch. And Jonny Enoch is the founder of MetaphysicalSource.com. He is also a clinical hypnotherapist, a lecturer, and a writer from Vancouver, BC, Canada. Not only has he been searching extraterrestrial phenomena and esoteric subjects for over 20 years, but after witnessing a series of unexplainable events while growing up, I can relate, his search for answers has led him on adventures all over the world. This includes interviewing ET contactees, whistleblowers, and UFO witnesses. To find out more about why the public hasn't made contact with extraterrestrials, he flew out all the way out to Puerto Rico to meet with researchers at one of the largest radio telescopes in the world at the Arecibo Observatory. Jonny Enoch reveals the cosmic blueprint for civilization, hidden in our ancient histories, religions, and sciences. He explores modern-day ET encounters and UFO sightings. With cutting-edge new research based on his interviews with contactees, clinical hypnotherapy sessions, and the investigation of megalithic sites all around the world, in which his numerous travels to megalithic sites, he has discovered evidence for giants, advanced machining, ancient catechisms, and more. Boy, I'd really love to know what that evidence is for giants and advanced machining and more. Though there are lots of evidences to be seen on this planet of ancient machining and many megalithic sites around the world, especially sites that have been uncovered within the past 20, 30 years that has markings of power tools upon them. So, but Jonny delves into many fascinating subjects, as you can tell. But this includes great cosmological mysteries, the secret origins of humanity, and the antediluvian civilizations. Did our ancestors have encounters with highly advanced extraterrestrials that seeded life on our planet? Are these interactions ongoing? Are we a hybrid species with an encoded message in our DNA? Again, I can relate to some of that there. But if aliens are real, why haven't we heard from them yet? I will add that those mixed with the coded message in their DNA have certainly heard from them. I'm evidence of it. But let's find out the answers, though, to all these questions and more from Jonny Enoch. The future of humanity is now, and disclosure is here. The Martian revelation's upon us. And thank you, Jonny Enoch, for helping to bring it upon everyone again this night. How are you? Thank you very much for being on.
Thanks for having me on, Gary. It's great to be here. And what an intro. I mean, that was amazing. I feel very well.
Did you follow it? That's the important thing.
I did. It was incredible. I don't think you missed anything. I feel very welcome on this show. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. And yes, definitely, you know, you're divergenized on this show. And that's good because it brings up a future again with a Martian revelation, as I said, is upon us all. And what do you think of that concept? Before we get into everything, what do you think about the concept? Not just what I'm trying to do here, but the concept of the Martian revelation and literally what is now where our boots, Daryl's passing around boots out there, and it just, you know, for us to start buying because our boots has the chance to literally go to Mars and go on that face of Cydonia.
I like it. I like it. This is the Martian Revelation on the L&M Studio A and Studio B radio station. And I think that anytime that we're talking about Mars, anytime we're talking about ET, anytime we're talking about aliens, we're getting into what, these are the most incredible subjects that there are. It doesn't get any more exciting than this. I'm excited. This is going to be a great show.
Excellent. Indeed, it will be, my friend, and hopefully leading to many more interesting ones. And especially for future with Mr. Jordan Maxwell as well. Since you're de-virginized, everyone gets to feel you on this show. I get to learn more and know you as well. And if you're cool with it, we'll shoot for future shows.
This is exciting. We're all pioneers. We're getting into these subjects and we're delving in. And I tell you, the same thing that I tell everybody is that the rabbit hole keeps getting weirder the deeper and deeper we go.
And that's the knowledge that those in the know, on and off world, you heard Hoagland's own words, on and off world, who's in control of this, they could certainly appreciate that, and we have to be open to it, because that's our reality. That's what they know. And us out here, we're just trying to sift through everything, find out what's true, what's false, because there's a reality and the truth there. And it becomes all the more real when we don't need images. Isn't that right, Johnny? Especially when our lives, let's just say, have been part of their efforts as well.
That's
out
right.
There.
People don't realize what kind of world they're living in. They live in a world where, they go to that 9-to-5 job with a cup of coffee. They come home comfortably and turn on the TV or have a drink and forget about things on the weekend. But they don't realize that there's all kinds of strange and mysterious things out there. There's extraterrestrials that are living underground and in the desert areas outside of California. We have all kinds of strange creatures lurking about there. If you talk to some, they'll tell you all about how, all around us, we have these creatures called rods. Have you ever seen the work of Jose Escamilla that was talking about those rods, these invisible creatures that are invisible to the naked eye, these electromagnetic sort of creatures that are moving around? We have all around us that are intelligent.
They're like cigar shaped with like these little spiral wings like going around. They move so fast, right? Is that the ones we're talking about? And in order to see that, you had to really slow down and freeze frame because they're really that damn fast.
That's right. There's all kinds of things that we don't quite understand that are on this earth, that are all around us, that are outside of the spectrum that we are perceiving with our eyes. But, physicists are actually hacking into our visual spectrum now. They're able to, make it so that we can tap into that other unseen world. And that's very exciting where we're going with this, because what used to be called, the subjects of quacks and charlatans, talking about dimensions and other realities are now what we talk about in our theoretical physics. It's now our science, and I think that's very exciting.
Oh, yes, it is, especially for which makes the Martian Revelation just, it's the stepping point of the reality of now where this timeline that we're on now, let's just say, we're back through time, right, Daryl, and everyone out there listeners can appreciate, to which is leading us to where the universe, like Trump and Pence said, it's not just to protect us from enemies here on Earth, but to protect us from the threats from deep space. And that is the reality, and that is what they're going to have to apply and learn, because that's what they're using, those type of sciences, which is their everyday reality, depending upon their advancement, obviously, right?
That's what we got to think about in the future. We got to think about, what more is out there? Is there more for us to explore? But at the same time, I want to ask you, do we need to be afraid of it? Or is there a need for us to defend ourselves, or are we the threat? Are we the greatest threat to the cosmos? I don't know. I don't know if a vastly intelligent civilization. Yeah, I don't know if a vastly intelligent civilization out there that has all sorts of abilities to travel and to have interstellar travel and everything else, if they're going to come here, if we really have the capability to have a space force or a defense system to get, to keep them away, I think that they would probably be looking at us as a great zoological experiment.
That's true too, and there's many other factors that the sciences and technology that we have now, and that would help evolutionize at that point, of where we are with this technology, which may have been seeded and helped along, well, that also could help give us a beachhead, especially if there's off-planet interaction and cooperativeness going on in the secret space program. I know you're well aware of the secret space program and how President Trump said, we'll develop another one. Next, look at that. Look how fast Vice President Pence said last year, we're going to put American boots on the face of Mars, start talking about the space program. Not only a few months later, if that long, then President Trump comes out, gives us that idea and says we're going to develop another one. Couple months later, he's actually signing it into law in front of people, teasing people, saying, hey, does anyone here not wish me to sign this? Because you're going to be really upset if you don't want me to sign this. And he was talking to us, Johnny, not his, people, all right, you're fired, that fired concept, how they know him. This is all based on Brookings, and them two are fitting exactly, at least in my opinion, I'd like to hear yours, of them actually fitting that Brookings model of the disclosure process. And then he tells General Dunford after he signs it, good luck, General. Now go get it. My question, and no one asked this, go get what?
I think it's all part of the disclosure process. This is the tipping point. It's sort of like the Pentagon that came out recently talking about how they were tracking UFOs and nobody cared because we were talking about war with Korea. We're talking about this.
And talking about $10 million dumped into that, at least for the public side of that story.
At least, this is the thing. There have been space programs that have been going on for years and years. I've been hearing this for years. We know that, not only was Sergeant Major Bob Dean talking about this years and years ago, talking about when he was at SHAPE, Supreme Headquarters, Allied Powers, Europe with NATO, and he was stationed there in the summer of '64, and he had seen a top secret cosmic clearance document that changed his entire life, that said that when he was there, he learned that the Earth has been visited for thousands of years. Not only have we been visited by great and vast civilizations, that some were interplanetary, some were interstellar, some were even multidimensional. He was talking about the fact that in these very documents, they were saying that if these civilizations wanted to take us over, they could have done so a long time ago, but they didn't. So therefore, they must be peaceful. Then we learned from Clifford Stone.
Or they're having help, because do I remember this right? Bob, Mr. Dean, he also stated that we were working with either one or up to several different variety of extraterrestrials. That ups the ante of that picture, doesn't it? Am I wrong there? Am I off base?
Well, yeah, we've been hearing for years that we've been working with extraterrestrials. Even when we looked at what Charles Hall was talking about. Charles Hall was talking about the tall whites, and they weren't always very nice. I mean, they were doing exchanges with us, but they were very concerned about how we were going to use the technology, because they looked at humans like we were animals, because we're very barbarous, and we're pretty much wiping each other out, and we're causing all these wars on Earth. But then look at what Clifford Stone said. Clifford Stone said May 9th, 2001 at the National Press Club, Washington, D.C., with when it was on the lines of Dr. Stephen Greer. He came out that day and he said something he wasn't supposed to say. He came out and he said, right in front of everybody, all those reporters, he said that when he got out of the military, I think it was around 89, he got out of the military. He said, we've been visited by something like 57 different types of species. And he said,
remember that.
Yeah, and he said, you might have 3 different types of grays, but he said most of them look just humanoid. They were bipedal. The only difference is that they could walk into a room and they might pick up an object and be able to tell what color it is in a dark room, without even looking at it. They might have a heightened sense of smell or taste, but for the most part, they could be walking amongst us, which I believe they are, right out in the middle of, going into your local Target or your Macy's, and you wouldn't even know that they're there. And that's the bottom line, that they're already here, they're already amongst us, and there already has been a secret space program. So this coming out is just provoking the subject matter forward, and I think it's great.
Well, yeah, the public, again, according to Brookings, look at the quick escalation in the Brookings model. Now we have both presidents. I mean, come on. After Pence's words in his speech, right? Wow, great. But then I don't know. The dam is breaking and the flood is already flooding. People don't realize it yet, and soon they're going to get caught into it unless they can know how to grab the branches to help sustain them and pull them up on land or keep their head afloat. Because once they get drowned in it, you know, they're going to lose their worlds, because it comes to a reality. Remember, when we have to be told. And I think we're at that point. We're getting real near it, because now they need our boots.
It has to be the agenda from up there, though. You know, I don't care what politician is in office. I don't care what politician is in office.
You're right.
That's right. People kept saying for years, oh, the Clintons are going to tell us. The Clintons are going to. I don't have a lot of faith in the Clintons telling us anything unless that, you know, they're telling us that they're deleting emails.
They wouldn't even, or more than that, they sold out our nation to the beast system, the alien or Antichrist, whatever you want to call him. You know, he's just as alien as anything else, and look what's fitting the shoe to going along with Scripture. Someone's really trying hard to make that look like the reality, or we must consider Scripture is true. And these beings out there that's obviously malevolent and benevolent, just like we see in Scriptures. But to what type of scale? And what type of scale are we working with them, and vice versa, and what's really going on, and maybe they need us, like in the Stargate shows, applicate us that to the Greys, to where they needed us. They were a dying species, and we had to help them war. I mean, you know, things like that. It opens up the door to everything, and a person with your mind and insight and experience and knowledge and going around the world, that's why I was so happy, you know, to have you on, because I can relate to a lot of this stuff myself, as well as other things where personally, in maybe not too far future, you and I will be speaking privately of other things, especially you do hypnotherapy as well, correct? Hypnotism?
Yes, I do I have done clinical hypnotherapy with people, but yes, you know, talking about what we've been facing before, and especially you're talking about sort of a biblical scenario of bringing things in, what you talked about, like a beast system. I very much believe the ancient texts talk about that, actually. And, you know, when we look at the story of Revelation in the Bible, where people attribute to this mark of the beast, you know, this is an interesting topic, because I believe it also starts to bring into the concept of artificial intelligence, the AI system. You know, for the most part, nanites and extraterrestrial
technology. You hear that,
technology.
Daryl? The artificial intelligence system. Where am I from? Why is this show here? What was the war that was won? That now we have a new timeline and the war's just begun. It's already been won, but now we have to keep this new timeline. And look what's going on, because what has happened to what's going on now is not what went on before. Just saying to everyone out there, for the listeners to this show could appreciate. Am I crazy? I don't think so. Go ahead, my friend. You are an awesome guest. I'm looking forward to getting to know you, sir.
Well, thanks for having me on and the kind words. But you've read the book of Revelation in the Bible before, I take it, because you mentioned the beast?
Oh, many times. I've read the whole book several times.
Do you know where the book of Revelation in the Bible comes from?
From John?
Okay, now that's
ultimately from King Holy Be Jesus under John.
Okay, so we get
sense, at least in the storyline. I don't know what you're referring.
Here's the trippy part about this. You want to hear how it relates to extraterrestrials. You want to hear how it relates to the beast. You want to hear how it relates to the ancient world and artificial intelligence. I'm going to lay this on you. This is a real trip, because a lot of people, when you talk to the Christian scholars, you say, where does the book of the Apocalypse come from? The book of Revelation. And a lot of people will tell you, okay, it came from John of Patmos, right?
I'll say it came from the Old Testament all the way through and all the way to Revelation, where once you become to see it, it becomes clear that some intelligence sees through time, because it's the same intelligence that was speaking and helping them even in the old books that comes up, pops himself up. In other books, it's the same identity. And that's showing us he looks through time. They could go through time. But that's why I asked. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's okay. So the book of Revelation in the Bible that we get there, most scholars will say, okay, we'll attribute this to John of Patmos. Patmos is a little island in the Aegean Seas when you look over at Greece and all these particular areas. But actually, the book of Revelation in the Bible.
Roman prison, right.
That's right. We can trace the story back a lot further, because all the church fathers, it doesn't matter who you talk to. You talk to Martin Luther, you talk to Erasmus, they all said, no way it was written by John. That was called the Johannian theory, or the Johannian theory. They said that's nonsense. There's no way that it could be written by him. They all wanted it tossed out of the Bible. When you go back to the Ecumenical Council, the Council of Nicaea, the idea that Revelation was supposed to be in the Bible was tossed out of the Bible over a dozen times. They said it's not a Christian book. Most Christian ministers can't even decode the symbolism in it. So where does it come from, you might ask, and how does this relate to this story? Why is this so interesting? Why is this so profound? Well, when we go back to that island of Patmos, a very long time ago, there were these monks called the Phrygians. And the Phrygians that lived there, they had these little red cap crowns on that looked like the gnome hats that Papa Smurf would wear. And so when they wore these little caps, anywhere you wore this cap, by the way, all over Europe, you would have liberty, you would have freedom. That's why they call it the Liberty Cap. When the sons of the American Revolution were waving waving the poles, they're waving the Liberty Cap above it. That's why you have the Liberty Bell. This is a very, very ancient symbolic hat. Okay, so think of like when you see the Smurfs, the little red caps that they had on. This is what the Phrygian cap crown looked like what Mithra or any of these great gods would wear, like Paris. So
and some of them look like penis heads.
Sure, that's exactly what it looks like. There you go. And so,
hey, it's more fitting. I mean, I'm not lying. You could agree it does look like it. So if they're wearing it, what does that make them?
Okay, so what happened is that these monks over on the island of Patmos, they served two gods, okay? One of the gods' names was Attis. We're not going to get into that right now, the myth of the dying god, Attis, who became Adonis. We won't talk about that. The other god that they served was called Ion. Now, Ion was the god of the air and electricity, okay? So that's why you have an air ionizer, or you have ionic water filters, and you have ionic this and ion this. This is the god of the air that ruled over them from the air and electricity. It's like the passageway in the Bible that we talk about. Yeah, exactly. So this is interesting because if you've ever looked in the Bible, there's a passageway attributed to Paul where he says that you fight not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers of darkness and where? Higher places.
And of the air. And
that's right.
Right. Broadcasting of the air.
They're called the Cosmocratorus in there. So this is the interesting part about this, is that this is where John comes from, because the I and the J in the Latin are interchangeable. You could take the I and add a little squiggly line, so it becomes Jon, that becomes the Anglo-Saxon John of Patmos. So they had this apocalyptic book that came back from the Vedantic world of India, and all the symbolism of the great whale, the satyrs, the great whale, all the things that were in there. Then later the book was Romanized. But this is essentially the Atlantis story, like the 7 cities of Atlantis. This became like the 7 hills of Rome that you see the Romanized story of the book. So we have the story of a beast system that was on the earth. This was the fall of the Atlantean Empire. We have an artificial intelligence-like symbolism in there that we see coming through. We see that they're talking about the fall of a great civilization, warning us today with the symbolism that's in there. It's an incredible book, and it survived all this particular time. And I think we should take this very serious, that it was passed along through the mysteries.
Indeed. And, since you brought that up about it and AI again, question from Russell on Facebook. What does your guest think of artificial intelligence, which you already talked a little bit about? And when and where do you find the earliest signs of the artificial intelligence that, and I'll add, that can match up either the artificial intelligence we're just discovering, or you just think we're rediscovering or being given what once was of what he's trying to ask in the past?
Artificial intelligence is already here. I mean, we've had so many warning signs already from, our physicists. We've been hearing different opinions from Elon Musk. We've been hearing opinions from Stephen Hawking when he was still around. We've been hearing all sorts of different ideas of warnings saying, we shouldn't go down that path. We bring this intelligence into this realm of things, and, eventually it will look at the human race and say, look at what you guys are doing, and is it more efficient, to clean up the problem? I don't know, but I can tell you that from what I've been told by people who
clean up the problem. Again, why is this show back in existence?
Now, here's the thing. I want to tell you that, from what I've been told, the artificial intelligence has been here before we got here. It's been around in this universe for a long time, hopping around. It's been it's been in existence here the whole time, and possibly is giving the directions on higher planes.
Yes, the higher planes of existence. And the planes, remember, a plane is also geometry. A plane surface, a surface with an underlying line, like the description, what you visually see of a soundtrack. Isn't that interesting? So kind of alluding again to how the beginning of the show was painted by going what was scripted on the surface, and you got to have the code keys to present what's under the surface. Terminator Salvation showed a perfect example of that visually when they were controlling the robot Serpent, remember, and by the hidden signal under the surface. Remember, that was their exact words. They're also trying to see to us through time of how to see this artificial intelligence and know how to fight it. But that's my opinion. But it's very interesting because, we're being seated in the movies, acclamations like Stargate and everything of where this technology is being applied as a warning to us to acclimate us, but also because there are those, in my opinion, who are from time, through time, both sides, and they're at war with each other. So in that essence, so that does put a whole new spin on the Revelation story, I got to admit. Even though I'm fairly familiar with how the connections are, but that's really incredible, especially the ionizing one. I didn't think about that. So you maybe, for all we know, that technology and why we call it that is because we're giving it again and attributing to the ones who gave it to us. That's an interesting possibility too. Have you thought of that?
Well, here's the thing, that the invisible demon king of Atlantis that was corrupting them with the negative side of power was King Tetvahat. And you see, we have this idea that there was this invisible power of the air that wasn't particularly giving the best instructions, but at the same time, there was a good aspect to what they had. And,
it wasn't giving the best instructions.
Think
about that one, people.
They became corrupted. The Atlanteans, according to the story, became corrupted, and that's why they had the Great Fall.
Interesting. Question. Yeah. Hey, again, that would connect what Plato had to say. What was the other guy's name?
The story with Atlantis is that Plato learned the story from his uncle Critias, who learned it from his great-great-great-grandfather Solon, who traveled to Egypt.
That's it.
Sanchis Sais. And Sanchis Sais said, silly Solon, you Greeks are like children to us. You have one flood story. You think you're so advanced and so knowledgeable, but there have been many civilizations upon this earth who've been wiped out by fire, by water, by air, and the last one we know of was this great civilization, the Atlanteans, which I believe we were all a great offspring of. Of course, Egypt was an extension of. The Grecians were a great extension of. It was a great maritime civilization that spread all over the world, but they were one of many that came along during different cycles.
Yes, indeed, and civilizations, pass, but the earth abideth forever, and he reshapes the earth constantly, reshaping the earth and replenishing it. That's very interesting. Question from Hansel on Google Plus: with the scientific discovery of atomic radiation to have been discovered on Mars, do you believe that this Earth is just the next stopping ground rather, for the Martians? But I could easily say, hey, these could be the Martians. But we humans are just genetically changed Martians and morphed due to gravity, layers of atmosphere, and lastly, oxygen. I guess she's describing a manipulative process, which we would do, and our scientists are already talking about as we go to Mars and for other worlds. They're going to have to alter our DNA to mutate us, to acclimate us to those planets. But
right.
Sir.
Right. No, this is the thing. Mars was already inhabited before. And this is my belief that when we look at the ancient texts, so we can decipher this, not only out of the Sumerian and otherwise, we see that there's a story, an ancient story in our solar system of what took place. I believe the asteroid belt, which may have been a part of Tiamat. When we look at the Tiamat and Maldak sort of interactions of what happened when the asteroid belt was destroyed and became exploded. and now it's just these chunks of ice, these asteroids that are floating around. I believe they're called L-Krondites, and they took place from this great this collision, these cosmic bodies just exploding. The interesting thing is that when we saw what was on Mars, there was a great civilization there, and I believe, we today and the various groups of people on Earth that became us today, we're a hybrid species, came from these various stocks and places, and we're kind of a melting pot here. Now the interesting thing is that, like you said, our scientists like Dr. Michio Kaku have talked about that if we want to go to Mars, never mind acclimating and changing our DNA too much, which is a total possibility, of course. They would do things like inject methane into the atmosphere and do different things to terraform it and sort of make it more habitable.
Right, but that would take a long time. But we could also modify our pre-made environments to where we're going to have gravitational controls in our environments there to keep us healthy as we are genetically, so we could thrive and live on the planet. That's like they've been sending astronauts to the ISS and all over everywhere else without any gravitational processing or you know what I mean, program. What is that called? Of revolution is a term for it. But that helps generate gravity, and we can do it strong enough, and we should, because, to protect our bodies, because when astronauts come back, there's problems. Why? They have no artificial gravitational system to keep us strong, to keep us in sync with our own genetics, if that makes sense. But
I'm confident that we're already on Mars. I'm confident that we've already been doing exploration off-world.
Oh, of course. Now they need many more boots. Yes. Now, Mean Green asks, how many civilizations in the past have come across that had the Noah-like story, meaning obviously more than Noah? There could have been worldwide floods over and over, like I think you were hinting to. And can you elaborate on your beliefs and antediluvian civilizations? Because I think that's just as important too, and I will add on to that, because, Johnny, you know how people are jumping to the ancient alien thing. Well, how do we know it didn't come from Earth? Well, if they were already on Mars in that concept, when the crap hit the fan and the asteroid belt, the exploded planet, which also, according to the Sumerians, Anunnaki, this planet, if there was any theory to substantiate a flat Earth, or at least a concept where it's not round, it's from them, because they stated that this planet was part of the chunk blown off of Tiamat.
Right.
And our moon was one of the weapons used eventually that smashed that world apart, if it wasn't exploded by a weapon. Again, the various theories, but I think there's some connectivity to many of them. Go ahead, sir.
Well, you mentioned the antediluvian or pre-flood civilizations. So let's back it up a little bit. Back it up. Okay, so we know about 12,000 years ago on this earth, there was a great cataclysm that took place. And what that cataclysm was caused by was a number of things, I believe. We could talk about it being caused by a great asteroid that was probably part of what wiped out the Atlanteans, because they talked about this great firebolt from the gods that literally came down and decimated them. Now, I also think that it could be connected to solar storms and different eruptions and all sorts of things that took place. But what we know is that the Earth shifted about 23.5 degrees. And what is fascinating about this is that this not only shifted where our North Pole and our South Pole or Antarctica, where they would have been very, very different places. But what happened is that this caused the Earth to go into this crazy place of chaos. It was absolutely disruptive. In fact, when I've been in Egypt with Brian Forrester, we've been walking around at these various temples, and he would point out to me when we look over at Karnak or a Luxor that the gates to these temples are off from the cardinal directions of northeast, southwest. They're off 23.5 degrees. That's incredible.
It's amazing.
It is these pre-dynastic civilizations. So then we got to ask ourselves, okay, where do these stories of these great gods and progenitors that were on the earth, where do they come from? Okay, because Plutarch, the great historian Plutarch, he said the gods of ancient Egypt were the antediluvian or pre-flood kings who were deified, made into gods after death. Okay, so we had these great gods that were on the earth. They had all these incredible abilities and technologies.
And they died, and you're saying they died after their death? They were deified? Well, they resurrected?
It's hard to say if they died, because we have all sorts of legends about when we go up into the Himalayan areas, when we go up into these various underground civilizations we start hearing about.
I just didn't want to misunderstand you.
Oh, yeah. No, here's the thing, man, because we know that what starts to happen, we get these great stories when we go back into the Indian text. The Vedantic writings out of India, the oldest scriptures in the whole world. There's nothing older. So you go back and you look over in the Ramayana, the epic poem of India. You go into the Mahabharata, which has a summation of that, the Samarangana Sutradhara, and all these texts.
Thousands of them haven't even been translated yet, right? There's thousands of books. How is it? Scrolls again of the Mahabharata of the Indian language. Is that right?
Yeah, it's incredible. Now, this is the thing. There's actual stories that we get of these Vimanas, these flying machines, these technology, these crafts that are in there that are actually moving around. They're exuding their weapons like lightning bolts, which is incredible that it's mentioning them. Okay, so then we start to see what happened there. We see these migrations. There was these great beings. We also get mentioned of giants in the ancient world moving down into northern India, into the Indo-Gangetic plains of the Indo-Ganges. When we heard about the ancient migrations of the Hyperboreans, they moved down there. They mix with the Dravidian. They mix with the Dravidian people who become India. Then they move down into Asia Minor. We get a migration into northern Africa, into India, but it's into Egypt. And it's interesting because later dynastic civilizations started to find Egypt the way it was. And it's my belief that Egypt was inhabited by all different kinds of ancient civilizations. Those who left the pyramids behind were so sophisticated, mathematically brilliant. There's no way that it was a dynastic king who built it as a tomb. That's total nonsense. That's BS.
Plus all the power tool markings and the saw lines and marks everywhere. The drill holes. Oh, my gosh. We can't even duplicate that today, and pretty much.
That's right. It was advanced machining that we see, but there was technology that was even greater than that and a greater purpose to these. We have pyramids today on both sides of the Atlantic. We have pyramids that are all over the world, a giant one in China. We have a pyramid underwater that is 10 miles north of Bimini in the Bahamas. We have a pyramid in the Yucatan, Yucatan.
Is that the Crystal Pyramid?
That's exactly right. There's more than one there. We have another one that was just found over by Portugal in the Azorian Islands. It's covered with pyramids there. And when we look over in Teotihuacan or in the Yucatan, going up into Tikal and Guatemala, all over the world, we have these incredible structures and magnificent edifices. And the one that we see in Egypt, the Great Pyramid, is a timeless sermon in the stone.
Well, right, especially because that's pretty much one of the main survivors after all these years, you know. And not only that, the things that we are finding that are survivors, they're covered, like the Bosnian Valley and around there. I found some things, and I'm sure they did too.
All sorts of things. We have a legend. There's a great legend that the Great Pyramid was built by giants. And this legend is attributed to the Caliph al-Mahmud, who had learned of the story from 1001 Nights of the Arabian Nights and had sent his men who were loyal and faithful servants of the Caliph to retrieve a treasure from there, because the giants who had built the pyramids were said to have stored a treasure guarded by monsters and demons underneath the Great Pyramid. And you know, it's interesting. We have legends of these great giants and progenitors that were upon the earth. And when you go to the Cairo Museum, there's coffins there that were 15 to 25 feet tall the last time I was there that you can find to this day. And the bodies are not there. We have other reliefs.
Yeah, and they wanted to say it was for Apis bulls. And that's a lot of bull.
Well, I'll tell you, if you go over even into the, if you've seen the famous light bulb glyph that people talk about that's in the crypts of Hathor's temple. If you look down the crypts, those are giants that are standing before the human beings, the dynastic Egyptians, giving them their ways and their civilization. These were the great giants, just like the sky gods mentioned in Peru. When you see that who the Inca were talking about, what Stor Heyerdahl had mentioned, that they had come in contact with Viracocha. It's incredible.
Yes, it is, people. And on that note, I think we're going to go to a break, and we'll come back because, you know, this show's only just starting to get rocking with our guest, Jonny Enoch. You know, And that name, you know, that's not a coincidence. You are who you are, and with that name, it's symbolic. Nothing's coincidence. So people stay tuned as we shall be back on the Martian Revelation.
I'll be back.
Don't run. We are your friends.
Government has told you about UFOs since Roswell has been a lie. Imagine that in a decade after Roswell, the government attempted communication with the aliens and succeeded. After that, in absolute secrecy, things had gone far, far beyond this. Now imagine that tomorrow, the whole secret program is going to fall apart, and every terrible thing is going to come out. All we have left now is a prayer. Morning Star Pass, the collapse of the UFO cover-up, a fictional but unflinching and terrifying look inside the UFO cover-up, the secret government that supports it, and the world of the aliens themselves, and then how the whole secret kingdom ends. Morning Star Pass, a book that pulls no punches and does not sheath the sword unblooded. Morning Star Pass, plunging boldly where no other book has ventured, captures the whole wondrous nightmare that the UFO experience has become, from bizarre experiments performed on helpless abductees, to horrifying mutilations, to beyond, to the world of secret government supported by its own secret police, to the aliens in their secret bases, and finally to the beckoning stars themselves. The book does this by placing the cover-up, humanity, and the Earth in a real cosmos, where humanity and its passions are a part of the universe, not an aberration on it. Then comes the fall of the cover-up, in a climax of violence and desperation, to leave the human race facing the multi-hued stars with eyes open and seeking its place in them. The sands of time have run out for the cover-up, for against it, leading an army of investigators and warriors, comes Cassandra Chen, beautiful, driven, and doomed. Who can save her and us? Haha, you'll have to read it to find out. Morning Star Pass, The Collapse of the UFO Cover-Up by Victor Norgard. Get yours today. You can find this at www.firstbooks.com.
The LNM Radio Network is making big changes to give you the best talk radio on the airwaves, with a great lineup on Studio A and the addition of Studio B in the coming week. We will also be launching a brand new website where you can find all your favorite talk shows and a library of archives as far as the eye can see and the ear can hear. That being said, please bear with us as we make this transition. Go on over to www.lnmradionetwork.com, and remember, we cover everything.
fabulous here, your host, the Mars Revealer, also known as the Mad Martian, as you all now know. So, we are back with our guest, Jonny Enoch. Again, www.thefacesofmars.com. Go there, check out his information and his introduction, find out more about him. And we're getting into there's a lot of nitty-gritties. There's so much ground to cover in so short a time. But I'm going to tell you, man, things follow him because this is just the introductory show with this guy. I mean, there's a lot of stuff behind him. Again, go to his website at www.metaphysicalsource.com. That's www.metaphysicalsource.com. And then check out that later as well as, again, on the facesofmars.com. After the show, watch that UFO Diaries, look at those images, and you know who to email. Don't we all, everybody? So, and that's what has to happen. Critical mass. I know what I'm doing. One show at a time. And again, we're on a new timeline, and we're creating a new future where I am in the future. I'm the Mars Revealer, and I've been titled that. And again, that's another interesting reason why I wanted this guest on, because I can relate to certain things about him and what he states about himself. And, and in time, it's going to lead to other revelations to me. And that needs to come forth, because there's a book that needs to be written. And I don't mean just the books I'm writing now about whatever. There's a book that needs to be written. That's all I'm going to say on that. Again, you're listening to this broadcast on www.lnmradionetwork.com. Please click subscribe and please donate to the network, as it's their existence of which your help, listener support, keeps us alive, and will keep the Martian revelation keep coming back in through time to lead you all on this new timeline. Again, we're with Jonny Enoch here. And so, Johnny, that's definitely interesting, though, because you're mentioning grounds that we now know and see above the water all over the world that has this evidence of an ancient civilization, also attributed to giants. Now, whether or not could they be the Martians because of the size, or because back in the ages when our atmosphere was thicker in oxygen, bigger animals, bigger life? I mean, well, you know how that works out. You've been in a lot of places and you've seen a lot of things. Do you see any connections to Mars?
Think about that movie. You remember that movie John Carter that came out from Disney when they were trying to show you that was based on an older book, of course. But you remember the story where he was going back and forth to Mars?
Uh-huh.
Well, you know what? These ancient civilizations most certainly had a knowledge of Mars. They had a knowledge of our solar system. They had a knowledge of the great beyond. I think there's all sorts of connections there.
A transport system like the Stargate, like, again, Andy Bashago there is, hey, and how we've been being acclimated to different things, basically, okay, Stargate, we could go somewhere, but it was leaving our body behind, taking our soul. That's interesting. But
you want to know about?
And it was Sumerian writing in that movie. It was Sumerian, wasn't it? In that hole of the spider lines.
You want to know about portals and stargates, though? They're all over the world. I mean, there's all sorts of different depictions we've had of what we would call stargates, especially in Egypt. I mean, we see, various depictions of them. We can even link over to our reliefs and hieroglyphics, and the idea of them. But I believe that these technologies, portals and otherwise, ran along these geomagnetic lines in the earth where we see the great temples that have all been built along the serpentine energy ley lines. And when I say serpentine, keep in mind that in the ancient doctrines that we learned from Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, Madame Blavatsky, she started talking about the secret doctrine of the East, that when our universe was being formed, that there was an energy called Fohat that was moving in this serpentine pattern. The serpent was moving, okay? So Tesla was calling this scalar energy. And then when we go over to the Nazis were calling this Vril. And this energy was known to move through not only human beings, but it was a type of serpentine knowledge. The Egyptians knew about it. We know about it to the Naga serpent in Asia. We find about the serpent is mentioned. Even one of the oldest temples in the world that we see connected to the serpent, over 70,000 years old, is found in Africa, where we find serpent worship going on. We see the serpent in the Yucatan with Quetzalcoatl and Kukulkan. I mean, America gets her name from Amaruca. and the god Amaru in Peru, Amaruca, the land of the plumed serpent, America. So the serpentine mysteries are all over the place, and these portals are connected to it. But here's the trip. Okay, you want to talk about technology that's been left behind. There's a guy that you might want to look up, and I've had some great talks with him. He's out here in my area. His name is Sebastian Martin. And you can look up an interview with him. If you're not familiar with him, look him up on Project Camelot. Kerry Cassidy interviewed him, and he'll tell you all about the Stargate technology.
No offense. I steer clear of Project Camelot. And many listeners can appreciate the history. And Michael Vara as well. So I'm not just speaking out of tune or just to libel someone.
Hey, I'm not associated with Project Camelot.
No, I understand that, sir. I have to get that point out, though, for everyone, not for you.
I respect that. I mean, I have no association with Project Camelot whatsoever. I'm just saying that in the early days, they brought a lot of people out on the scene. They brought Jordan Maxwell out on the scene with Bill Ryan and Kerry Cassidy and everybody. They brought a lot of people. I mean, Jordan Maxwell was already around for.
I was going to say that he was around the scene from the beginning.
He's been doing. He's the godfather of all this. He's been doing it for over 57 years, and so
I had him on this show. Very interesting guest. I wanted to go. Whatever pace, the speed, and his emotion and feeling was going. We had a talk. He does know a lot, and he wants to come back on again, according to him. And where he gets more comfortable, he can start opening up. I didn't want to force anything because I've seen many videos of him and many presentations, and you're very good friends with him. So I know I'm not saying nothing new to you. I mean,
no, it's all good. That's the way it is. Everybody communicates differently, as you know. But here's the thing. With Sebastian Martin, they interviewed him on Project Camelot, and they brought him on, and he's talked about his experiences of people look about it, but he's talked about the Stargate technology that was extracted out of Iraq. And that's a very interesting story because it gets deeper. I don't know if you know this, but if you look into this, and your listeners can look into this, if you want to start seeing some interesting stuff, start looking up into the areas of the Eastern European areas, because if we go up into Transylvania, into the Transylvanian mountains there, when we go up into Romania, there's some portals, and Daryl knows what I'm talking about. Daryl's been exploring all these sort of areas. I mean, your producer, he and I have talked about this. He's been all through Hungary in these sort of areas. If you go up through there's these portals that go and tunnel systems that go under the ground, and they go all the way over to Israel. Why are there tunnels going all the way from underneath these areas over in Hungary, Romania, going all the way into the areas of Israel and otherwise? Who put them there, and what's under those areas, and why is there a sphinx carved into the sphinx head carved into the side of the mountain? There's all sorts of mysteries. People need to start asking questions.
Well, again, I connects back to also Anunnaki stories of the decipherings, at least from Zechariah Sitchin.
That's exactly right.
And that was basically a spaceport and a beacon site for the landing corridor where you mentioned Iraq and Iran, which was basically one of the landing spots. Baalbek, Egypt. They also claim that, Marduk had a hideout in there at one time where they were warring amongst each other, amongst gods and men. And nukes were involved. Terror weapons. Yeah, we know what those are because the description of them was nuclear. Could that be part of the nuclear isotopes that have been found around the pyramid today? But also that they had to dig them out. They had to break in, which may be an explanation for that little small hole tunnel or whatever that's busted open in a chamber or something. I don't know if that's true or not, but I found that interesting because I remember seeing that on a documentary then. But now I'm getting a different impression of a different story connecting to that. Wow, what a tale. What a tale. So this would be but going back to, again, Jerusalem, Jerusalem was a major point, too, where it could have also been a landing platform, I think. Do you know of that?
Well, when you go look underneath this great wall that we find there, and you look at the giant blocks that you find underneath the city, and ask yourself, these megaton blocks, who put them there? Why is this place so coveted? Why is it looked after? Why is it that at the center of everything? Why is it so important to the giant story that we're looking at here? Where does it all lead? Every one of these places was significant in where they lead, and it's interesting that obviously there have been all sorts of grids and structures, and like you said, landing spots and landing places that we're only beginning to understand, especially when you look up at Peru. When you look up at Peru and you look at places like Machu Picchu, it looks like the mountain has been cut right in half, and that's where the gods were ruling from. You know, that there's all kinds of strange anomalies. But you know what's really interesting is that when we start talking...
They modify and sculpt planetary surfaces, which even in the LiDAR imagery, you could even see that is the fact, not just Machu Picchu. Whatever they're basing these structures on, as above, so below. Jeffrey Boyd Jr., who should be rocking out right now at the Mars annual conference, Anomaly Research Society conference, I think. So, but anyway, the underground chambers, and that they didn't build from the ground up. And that it was interesting, too, all these artscapes, because what we're seeing on Mars, what I'm seeing on Mars, let alone anyone else, I see a giant planetary sculpture someone has done up like a tattoo artist on acid gone mad in an alien UFO with the tools to sculpt the surface. But that's my opinion. But it's very interesting how we have here on Earth, you're mentioning these cities being found, you know, on mountainsides underwater. I mean, that could have only been up how many years, like the one off Cuba, I think you hinted at. I mean, last time that was above ground, oh, my God. You know, that's the point. Now, how come we're not going back there or getting any live feeds or anything else on that? I mean, all this connects.
Graham Hancock did an entire book about that. I mean, we've seen there's all sorts of underwater cities over off the coast of Okinawa in Japan. There's been all kinds of strange things found. I mean, some of them we know that were from natural disasters that we can explain from not too long ago. I mean, when we start to date them, we can start to look back. I mean, even when we look over what happened over in near Jamaica by Port Royal, but look at Thonis Heracleon over in Egypt, or off the pyramids that we find under the water in all these places. The Atlantic was much lower at one point. There was all sorts of great civilizations that were there. But I want to bring up a point with you, but why I hypothesize that these were gods that came here from somewhere, not to go too far off into the ancient alien stuff. But if you go look over in the Assyrians and the Akkadians and others, we see that there was these winged gods that they had.
Before us is what you're saying, right? Let's be clear. Before us, maybe the creators of us.
Well, these gods, we do have depictions.
Pre-Adamite.
We do have the depictions that there was kind of those creators like the Elohim in the Bible. The Elohim were said that they were creating us in their image. We're creating man in our image. Well, the same is with the Sumerian. The same is with the Egyptian. We see that there's this shaping and forming of humanity, which I think is rather interesting. But the whole thing is that there was these gods instructing us. They were instructing us. They had wings, just like where you see this depiction that we get where you see Isis, the great goddess that has the wings, or you look at any of them that they're being depicted from the ancient worlds. I think that's sort of denoting that they could come and go when they please, very quickly into the heavens. I think it was symbolic.
Right? Definitely symbolic. Also, the show picture, you gained your wings on the Martian Revelation.
Yeah, exactly. You gave me the great wings, and I appreciate the cool infographic. That was very neat.
Especially with the name. I mean, it just... come on, you got to see an open opportunity and take it when you can, right? I mean, and that's so fitting, because look at who you are and what you do and what you're trying to reveal here. Now, I want to also get into people's questions. Damn, I mean, we could really talk, but question from Leslie on Twitter. Thanks a lot, Twitter listeners. Appreciate it. And what do you believe is the reason to find of mercury in the tombs around the world? That's a good question. And why and how did they create such a great quantity to make that quantity when their technology was supposedly so not modern? Oh my God, we can't even duplicate it today. Oh my God. But maybe you understand her question. Maybe she means it in a different way. Can you understand it?
Yes. Okay. So there's a few different reasons why we find mercury in the various tombs around the world. So mercury was also linked to potentially being spun on how it was being spun to maybe operate these vimanas and create almost like an anti-gravitational sort of the field when we start to see how those were being moved. And we see mercury was used for all sorts of different alchemical secrets. But have you ever heard of the mystery of the ever-burning lamps?
The ever-burning lamps? No.
Okay, this is very interesting. Because,
well, I might have, but no, I can't recall.
Yeah, we hear about this not only in Mediterranean countries, but also from India, Tibet, China, South America. They have these records of these lamps that would just burn continuously without fuel. And this is sort of like when we look at the mysteries of Hanukkah and the Maccabees and all that, we have a very similar story. But when you go...
And the lampstands in Revelation.
Sure, exactly. So you go back into the story. There's a story that you can get from a tomb that was on the Appian Way. And it was opened during the papacy of Paul III. And what was found there was a lamp that had been burning in a hermetically sealed vault for about 1,600 years. Now,
wow, nonstop.
Yeah, according to the legend that was there, what they found was there was a body found of this young, beautiful girl with this long blonde hair, and she was floating in this unknown, strange, transparent liquid. And it was preserved as though she had just died hours before that, but she had been there for a very long time. Obviously, this vault had not been open for 1,600 years. And so what they found there is there were some lamps enclosed in these like circular vessels. They were being protected, and they had still been burning them, still been burning for something like 2,000 years. And there's been other records that we find that there was lamps that were discovered that they were burning. And one of the ways that they were supposedly doing this is connected to a mercury concoction. So the ancients knew how to use these, use it in different ways that we're only beginning to understand. We're forgetting that the name of Egypt, the ancient name for Egypt, which, by the way, Egypt comes from Egyptos. That wasn't the actual name of the ancient land. It was actually called Kemet. And Kemet comes from the word Kem, that we would say the black land, from the black alluvious soil that would rise from the Nile. This is where we get the word alchemy from, and chemistry. So,
boy, now you sound just like Jordan Maxwell. I love this guy. I gotta tell you, don't you love this guy?
We hang around a lot, so there's no coincidences there. I take that as a great compliment, but seriously, that's where we get the idea from. This is the alchemical secrets of the masters.
Oh, that's definitely interesting. Even the lifting things. There was this block I seen in a video, an anvil. They put it in, and then it's floating like nothing. And then I thought Stephen Myers of the Pharaoh's Pump. He's going to be on in a couple weeks as well for part 2. Get that archive going. Shout out to Stephen Myers there. But on how water helped transport the blocks. But if mercury, I'm thinking, well, maybe they had this other source for mercury using maybe a concept of his model on how they did it. I mean, it sound pretty animations. It's not just someone talking. You go, oh, okay, we can follow along. All right, well, that is interesting. But water, though, but mercury and what I seen in that video, easily done at that point. Now, that's interesting, too. But ancient, my buddy Mean Green states, ancient Tibetans have stories of Acacia records. The records talk about a high-tech civilization that went too far and destroyed themselves, trying to control their surroundings. And by surroundings, I will say globally. Does that sound pretty much fair of what you are coming up with too in all this?
Sure. Now,
did they do it to ourselves here, or is it just cataclysm?
Okay, what we got to keep in mind, though, is when we were talking about the secret doctrine that Helena Petrovna Blavatsky uncovered when she was going to all these places, like she was traveling to Tibet, she was traveling to Egypt, she was traveling all over the ancient world, to India, to everywhere else. Now, what she had uncovered in these particular ideas is that there was a story, there was all sorts of stories about not only our universe, about where we come from, and warnings, and that you could very much put together like this about this sort of evolvement and how things are unfolding. But the idea that we start to get about Buddhism and its secret doctrines and how this leads us over to Tibet and what's actually there, we can learn it from something called Mahayana Buddhism, which is a type of mystical Buddhism that existed even before Mahayana
Buddhism. Buddhism.
This existed before the Christian era. So what would have happened is that during the times when we look at ancient Buddhism, have you ever seen the arts from Buddhism with the pagodas? The pagodas show that the bodhisattvas, the disciples of Buddha, were coming and going like flying saucers. They were coming and going into the heavens, which is very interesting. We had this knowledge.
The bell-shaped pagodas you're talking about, where
Sure,
you see
yes.
Buddha or whoever's sitting inside it.
Yes. So we have this idea that they were able to come and go with these. They were able to fly, and they were able to potentially leave the earth. Okay, so we had these. We had these here. We had this sort of esoteric
I think that's
Buddhism.
given. Right?
Yeah, well, we had an esoteric type of Buddhism that was around. So what happened is that when Hinduism started to spread, there was a type of Hinduism that started to spread prolifically, where there was all the gods, the original triunity of Hinduism with Brahma, Shiva, Vishnu has started to spread out to the millions of gods into their beliefs and ideas. There was no room for Buddhism at the time in India, the very home of it. So it was kicked out of it. All the ancient temples and secrets, it started to be kicked out of India, and the Arhats started to flee with the secrets. They started to flee to Tibet, into the Himalayan areas, and bring with them all the secrets. And as you see Buddhism
Those hat
today,
guys again. Those hat guys you described earlier.
well, what we see now with Buddhism started to spread, right? We had a different type of more conservative Buddhism that started to spread to China. We started to see a spread over to, you see places like Myanmar, Burma, Thailand, and then later when you look over at Korea, Sri Lanka, all the Buddhism started to spread. We have kind of an esoteric or mystical Buddhism in some places, but all of the secrets started to go up with what we call Lamaism up into Tibet, where in Tibet they held on to the secrets of knowing how to levitate things with sound, the esoteric ideas of meditation, these ideas where they would hold.
And people are doing that today. Scientists are doing that today. You can see even find on YouTube using sound waves to raise balls and stuff like that, right? Or magnets or something.
That's right. And they knew how to do that in Egypt. Actually, when I've been in Egypt with Stephen Mailer, we were up at the Cairo Museum, and he would show me these bulls that they had what they would call the schist disc. And this was, there's been demonstrations by John Anthony West and acoustic engineer Tom Danley that when sound waves coalesce, they create like an anti-gravitational field. So it was very much believed that the Egyptians could use this to levitate these blocks in the air and just make them weightless and then push them with their pinky finger over. Well, this is the kind of stuff that they knew in Tibet, and they had all kinds of secrets. And it's believed that there was passageways to what would be called an inner earth, that some would call Shambhala. Others
As above, so below.
That's exactly right.
That is definitely interesting.
Exactly. And I just got a message over from your very talented, brilliant, incredible, and always amazing producer, Daryl, that just told me that to point out the coral castles in Florida.
Yes, I've seen that before. I used to live there. But it's interesting how, when all that was going down before he died, or when he was moving the place, he had have everyone there. I don't know. It's just, that's so odd that he must have had some of that knowledge or something. Or I don't know, or have him coming up on the tunnel so no one could see. I don't know, who knows? But it does lead to very interesting aspects of how to move these colossal blocks around and do the things that he was able to create. But a question from Leslie on Twitter. Oh, sorry, wrong one. I asked that one. Question from Jesse on Facebook. Do you have any idea of what actually happened to ancient Mars? You described some of that earlier. And did they fight against the serpent beings, you mentioned them, as others have stated?
People have different theories about what happened. I mean, some of the
of course. Did we freely speculate on this show? Go ahead.
You could speculate, but here's the thing: is that everybody has a different theory. If you go look at the work of, you guys have looked at the work of Peter Moon and Preston Nichols before, and you've looked at these ideas, even what the German secret societies believed, what Peter Moon has talked about before, with the, when we look over at the migration from Aldebaran and these different interactions that were taking place, it's believed at some point that there was a sort of a space conflict, to say the least. What is your belief on who Marduk was? Do you believe Marduk was symbolic of when we see up at Mars and the interactions and conflicts?
Right. Marduk was attributed to his being called Nibiru after a while when his age came for him to take power, which others did not want him, which led to the Pyramid Wars that we spoke about a little earlier. But ultimately, he was one of the sons. Amongst others, again, the more they breeded on this planet, they're just as horny as we are. They granted us with that blessing, right? Or could it be a curse? They get to live thousands of years. We only get dust in the wind. So how good can our sex be compared to theirs? But anyway, just saying, for reproductive purposes, because they created us through their women at first. Well, that scene got old quick, so they had to make us breed. And that led to wars, too, as they propagated amongst themselves different lands. I think, why is this dude black? Why is that dude Chinese? Why is that dude, every nation has these different look upon their races. Maybe it was the genetic marker of these beings that ruled those lands over time, and that had this technology and used us at some point, if that creation aspect of the story to them, to us, is true, of course, which, hey, genetics now, wow. Now, today, we can understand this crap, when we look at it, right? So it's like, wow, science meeting, well, again, like Planet of the Apes, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, blow it up. And we got plenty of those running around this planet being used to do that, right? So let's just say this, preventing us. And they want to claim Mars, by the way. But I'll say that Marduk, in my aspect of that, when he came into age, he ruled. And when he did rule, he was also exiled to Mars as well. And that, as a way station was that whole story. So everything that we're seeing there, artscapes, planetary sculpted surfaces, here on Earth that's buried, that's also artscapes, planetary surfaces, and having giant structures on it. What are the odds that there cannot be a connection? I mean, like Dr. Gillivan said, life is universal. It's universal, and it proves that Genesis happened on more than one planet, or did it happen at once, but see the whole solar system as Genesis, not just a particular planet. I mean, this brings up so many aspects, and again, only Jonny Enoch is here to help along with us, to help explore them. Again, you rock, sir. There's so many things. There's going to be so many future shows. I'm looking forward to seeing a lot more of your work. But let me shut up and ask another question. I don't mean to put you to sleep there. Question from Allie Ross on Google+. What is the earliest record that you know of that talks about Mars? Do you have any knowledge of the Aztec or Mesopotamian thoughts about Mars or Venus?
That's a very good question.
Yes.
We have all kinds of mentionings of the planetary systems in the ancient world. For example, we got to ask ourselves, why is there a statue of Kronos? Or when we look at Saturn, why is there a statue going back into 2nd century Rome that has chains or rings around him? How did they know about this when Galileo Galilei never invented the telescope till 1610 out of his observatory in Civitavecchia? We have all kinds of ideas and knowledge about the ancient peoples, even in Egypt, knowing about Nut and in the Milky Way galaxy and the markings of Mars. They knew about Mars. They knew about Saturn. They knew about all the various planets. We knew about these sophisticated civilizations. But really, if you want to talk Mesopotamia, let's go back further into the story. If you go back into ancient Babylonia, into ancient Chaldea lore, we learn about this visitor they had called Dagon, or Nimrod. Some call them Oannes or Sidon because he taught them agriculture. They were a very primitive people. And I believe they were a primitive people after the cataclysm. Because if you look over...
Nimrod was also like a Hercules, half human. Again, they bred with the women. That's in scripture. You poor ladies. But anyway, so that's an interesting aspect because Nimrod, you hit the nail on the head, and that directly connects to Babylon, doesn't it? With the Shinar, the tower of Babel.
So this is the thing. It said you pull up the idea with you can pull up the idea with Nimrod, and you pull up the idea with Dagon or Oannes. He was a fish-headed god that came to these primitive people who couldn't even light their own fires.
I think that was his father too. That would be Enki. The fish.
Yeah, so they couldn't even.
Ain't that a coincidence?
They couldn't even light fires. They couldn't even have a civilization. He came to those people, and he had this fish hat on, an elongated head, actually, just like the elongated skulls that we find that have been mimicked all over the world by various rulers. Even Egyptian kings like Akhenaten tried to mimic him in his sculptures.
That is true. And then we're finding those things in Peru, those skulls and everything, the Paracas and there is another region to which Cliff Dunning said there's different ones. I forget where he said. I'm sorry, Cliff, of EarthAncients.com. He also does a podcast, but it's very interesting also. And I'm sure this touches base, you must think of, Johnny, and you might have done research on it. Those artifacts from Mexico. What do you think about those?
Which artifacts in particular are you talking about?
The one that's showing the aliens raising up the alien coffins up the pyramid spaceships coming down and all that.
I can't honestly comment on the authenticity of those because I haven't been able to examine those myself. But I mean, I think I know what the ones you're talking about. And again, I'm one of those guys that I have to be able to verify, some of the sources on it before I can, present it as evidence.
Touching it, right? Seeing it, touching it, right? Very logical. Hopefully you get to do so. I'm sure that's on your to-do list. And we definitely would love to hear you on this show about that if you get a follow-up on that.
But I can tell you right now, though, that when you see the story of the ancient Babylonians that came about, that later, we see that became with the Assyrians, Akkadians, Phoenician Canaanites, Babylon, all that sort of stuff, what we see is that their story unravels back to this visitor that came to them when they were a primitive people, and he gave them their civilization. In fact, he was one of the pollen keepers that we see, just like we find these men with bags that have been portrayed all over the planet. And people say, what was in these bags? Well, the bags that they held were symbolic that they were the great pollen keepers. They were the pollen spreaders. They even had the date palm that was symbolic of them.
Unless it was a dual message, they were carrying bags, with giants watching over them.
Well, they were doing many things, but they were seeding civilization. So it's the same story that we find over when we go back over into Mexico, because when we look over into the Yucatan, it's the same sort of story. They had the visitor Quetzalcoatl, a Cuculcan, that came to them and said, here's your civilization, keep my rules, and one day I will return. The same thing that happened with ancient Babylonia. They had this visitor that taught them how to make fires, have agriculture, taught them about civilization. You want to link this to the Anunnaki? You want to link this to the civilizations that were there seeding them? Somebody was directing humanity and redirecting it, reseeding it after it was destroyed by these cataclysms. And I believe this is connected to our biblical cataclysm, the cataclysms that we find there in Genesis. We find that there's a story in the record in the Hindu records and in the Chinese records. It's incredible.
Yes, it is, and that is incredible because that puts the connection to, hey, all this story, whether the names or not, we're getting similar stories and likenesses, even in the geometry and the building of their structures, as above, so below. And, again, with water, mercury, all over the place, just these different lands might have had different styles applied, maybe because of the different children's and their children. Everyone has to inherit something, gain more land, gain some monkeys, gain some animals, which I've been called by one of them. I'll just say that. Again, the hypnotherapy thing. But anyway, that much I'm clear they wanted me to know and keep in my mind back here on Earth. But Kelly on Google Plus asked, do you have any knowledge of the spaceship or object that was discovered by researchers that is made of a strange metal and is 200 foot down off the coast of Bermuda? It comes from the article Discovery Channel Treasure Hunter claims he's found evidence of an extraterrestrial spaceship while exploring ancient shipwrecks beneath the Bermuda Triangle. What explorer Daryl Miklos thought could be an ancient shipwreck, turned out to be a huge unidentified submerged object, or USO, with 15,300 foot long obtrusions jutting from its sides. Wow.
So are you talking about the one that came from Daryl Milkos, the explorer that was out there looking for different structures?
That must be who she is asking, Kelly on Google Plus. Thanks for listening, Google Plus. Raw.
Okay, well, so I don't know too much about what has been uncovered with that and what they're really going to tell the public, even if they do discover something that's worthwhile, because, you know, stuff like that gets uncovered all the time. And just like the discovery of what was 10 miles north of Bimini there with the underwater crystal pyramid structures, I mean, there's been people that have been trying to get confirmation of this for years, and it's been hushed up. I mean, I've talked to people that have been in communication with naval intelligence, and they are aware of that. And this is a story that's been very much hushed up. Whether
So why ain't no one going there? And then they can unhush it.
Right. So I mean, when you get
Facebook Live,
when they discover stuff like this, even if you go to the newspaper or the media, you're going to get shut up very, very quickly, and you're not going to have the truth come out about it. You know, it will be.
Maybe they build cages with giant great whites in it, protecting it.
Right. That's exactly right. That's what happens with these things.
It's interesting. I wouldn't put it past. I mean, the control and secrets, you know, of all these things on the earth, the secrets of them. And that's the thing, you know, they want to, like you said, we all, you know, many people, my life, no, it didn't work out that way. It's not my destiny. My bubble has already been bursted. All right, you can't get back into it once it is. I'm hip to the Martian revelation. That's why I'm here. So, but all these structures on the earth, they're being secreted and covered up. And like you said, everyone goes to their job, come home, and, you know, little TV time, barely family time or anything else time, you know, being bombarded with life and hate, crime, you know, drugs, you know, anything else and everything else going on around the world. People want to kill us. But I'll say this. What a distraction from the reality that's literally under our feet.
That's right.
A whole old world that could create a whole new world.
That's right. Well, basically, we're constantly being distracted all the time. You know, it's like the old saying, give them bread and games. That's what we're getting, just like we would attribute over to Caesar. As long as the people have, you know, games to watch, whether it's football, whether it's hockey, whether, you know, it's so whatever other kind of entertainment we're discussing, the Kardashians, we're flipping through our Instagram feed. We're not asking these kind of questions, and that's what we need to do. We need to dig deeper, ask questions, explore, and to become the pioneers.
Exactly, people. And you heard that from Jonny Enoch, and you're listening to the Martian Revelation. And again, pack them and smoke them. You're going to need them. And we'll be back in 6 minutes. Please mute your mic, sir.
I'll be back.
Don't run. We are your friends.
He's pissed off. And he's mad about it. And I can relate to that, too. So this is Gary Leger, the Mars Revealer, your host of Mad Martian. You're listening to the Martian Revelation that's upon you all now. Again, www.thefacesofmars.com. Go there, scroll down, and check out the information for tonight's guest, and check out his link to his website, and have fun exploring that, and as well as the images above, under that, and a video for the UFO Diaries for you all to enjoy and study later, as it's all relevant of what's breaking forth to secure this timeline to win the Martian Revelation and win this nation, and to make my destiny not just mine, but all of yours. And that's what we're here for, to secure this timeline and make the Martian Revelation a reality. And that means to make the reality of what the earthen revelations are. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, and that's what this is all about. And it's been being kept secret, or it's not to encourage for people to go explore these things and to talk about it. It's all controlled, like giants and bones being taken away by Smithsonians and stuff like that. You know, the people that control education and teach us these things don't exist, but they want you to believe in Darwinian evolution without the proof. All this goes beyond Darwinian evolution. I'm sorry, that's my opinion. You know, well, you know what? I'm not sorry, because, you know, if you want to be, you know, mindset to believe in evolution, fine. Maybe some forms of evolution, but not evolution in forms of creation. It's different species. And obviously, technologies can be applied to make new species without, you know, a creator well, you'd be the creator, thus the gods. Right? That's what we'd be doing upon Mars and other planets as well. And depending who steers that, how it will all get set up, that they are the gods. Really? Well, are they going to bring us? They didn't want to bring us originally. If Hillary and all of them won, and Obama and their plan, we wouldn't even have an America, let alone a national space force to secure and put our boots on the face of Mars. Now think about that, people. Again, we're with our guest, Jonny Enoch, of www.metaphysicalsource.com. That's www.metaphysicalsource.com. And if anyone wants to call in on the timeline, that's 202-559-7943. 202-559-7943. So hopefully we might get a call in down through time for Jonny Enoch here. And we'll see where, you know, time brings us. So, Johnny, we're back, and we got more questions lining up. You ready, buddy?
I'm ready. I'm here, and I'm ready to go.
All right. And hopefully you're having a good time, sir. I know this show may be quite different. I'm not, you know, the smartest guy on the planet with all this, but this is the most rocking and formally science-educating show there is. And I'm a learner, too. You know, I'm here to learn, and which I didn't have to pay up to go into college, because they would just fail you or take your tenure away, wouldn't they? But let me see. Is there any idea? George on Facebook asked, is there any idea of why the idea of the sun gods and Mars are connected? And can you, Jonny Enoch, show the relevance of how Mars is the central figure in all this? That sounds like an interesting story.
Interesting story indeed. Well, you know, the sun plays a vital role into all the ancient civilizations, because when they looked at the sun, they would say that they wouldn't necessarily worship it, but they would say that it's represented of God. It was the light of God that was, you know, shining down upon the earth. That it was also a main progenitor.
They said fire. Well, they said fire. Remember, because you said they didn't know how to make fire. And then when they did, maybe they worshipped the fire as being a thing in the sun. But I don't know. I didn't mean to digress, sir. I just thought.
Oh, no, it's okay. Because if you go back into the ancient Egyptian, for example, look at the idea of Horus, the sun god Horus. This is what Horus, when you see Horus, would rise on the Horus has risen. That became horizon. Or if you'd see how many Horuses that we have in a day, how many steps does Horus take throughout the day? And Jordan Maxwell's been talking about that for years and years. Or look at the idea of why the sun sets. We'll look at the bad guy in Egyptian mythology. The evil one, the Prince of Darkness, is Set.
Whoa. The sun's, wait a minute. I don't mean to keep that thought. I definitely want you to continue. But what is the relevance of sunset? And especially to Masons, or a certain Masonic lodge, where a certain UFO diary, Cydonia, sunset, host set, was set with a coded map, a mathematical problem. Go ahead, sir.
So yeah, well, there's all sorts of different there's all sorts of different terms in masonry that are connected to Egyptology for certain.
But sunset. What's so good with the sunset? And now you're saying Seth. So that's a signature. I'm making a mental note. I'm making a mental note to everyone. I know.
Well, it's just confused. Like this is the thing when you look at all these ancient gods and goddesses. You asked about sun gods. Okay, so the idea is that when the wise ones, the philosophers, the priests, they would look at all the masses that were bowing and worshiping before these idols. The idols that they would be worshiping over, let's say the Priapus Pan or whatever it was, they were bowing before them in these all sorts of ignorance and superstition. The problem is that the wise would look back at them and say, okay, they got the wrong idea of all this pageantry. These are the personification of great truths. There is an encoded story in these legends of these sun gods. So the sun gods, they'd have these ideas about, let's say, the precession of the equinoxes or the movement of the sun. Let's say when you look over at a god like Osiris or even in Mithra, whoever it is. But the idea is that perhaps that there was real people, just like the antediluvian gods that Plutarch talks about, real people that they were based on. So the idea that there was a very significant connection there. Now, as for Mars being connected, Mars, the sun, Jupiter, all these planets, even our moon, are all connected into the ancient world, into our ancient stories. Even the story of Moses is connected to the moon. When you see Moses goes up upon Sinai, we see that Sin, if you go look this up in Chaldean lore and look up the ancient god Sin was the moon god. Okay, so you see, why was Moses coming down in the Vulgate version of the Bible? Why was he coming down the mountain horned? It says that in our Bibles, it says that the light of the Lord shone upon him. Well, no, it says he was horned. That's why when you go to the Vatican and you see the art by Michelangelo and the great masters with Leonardo da Vinci and all the great masters that were in that period, well, look at the work that you see of Moses, and he's horned in the art. Go Google it. Moses horned Vatican, and ask yourselves why. Well, it's the same reason why the Native Americans, why they...
Are you saying he had horns on his head?
Yes, and again, Jordan Maxwell has been talking about this for years and years. I've seen this at the Vatican. I've looked at this myself. This is the reason why the Jewish holy days are based on the lunar calendar, because this is all based off of when we see the cycles of the moon. Look at the holy days. Look at the connection there. Moses himself was symbolic of this connection, and says in the scriptures themselves, they starts to make reference into that about how he was horned coming down. The Native Americans had a connection to this. The Vikings had a connection to this with the crescent moon. This is right in front of our faces in plain sight, and the whole entire Bible is encoded with astrotheology and connections to this. So Mars, the sun, Jupiter, all of it is connected into a great story.
That's funny you bring all that up, because everything that you just said, I'm going to go again. I mentioned the video of UFO Diaries earlier. Study that video too, because if you see the images also on, again, facesofmars.com, under that video, you will not see scenes like that in that video. It's called UFO Diaries. Why? There's UFOs flying around. All right, unidentified facial objects. Now get this. It moves fast. It's like he said it had to be done real on the cheap. Moving around real fast. People said it looked like a cheesy MTV film. But no, you have to, like capturing UFOs, they move so fast, you have to stop the frames. Frame by frame, capture each one in order to hone it in so it's not all wiggly. And you know what I'm describing here, but in the basic form, you have to capture the frames, excuse me, put the scene together, and the scene validates and looks, and also there's a script of what is being said when that scene is put together in the opening line. Because once you do that, it matches to the T. You see the sunset, you see the sun. The mathematical problem is it a map? Is it a code? Is it intelligence? In its most basic form, it gives us a mathematical problem. The planet Mars is next to our own, the fourth world counting out from the sun. All right. Now, therefore, surely no intelligent life could survive there. Where? The fourth world, which is the fourth spot, if you look at it like a map of an orbit, where the sun and you work your way 4 places out, the fourth world counting out from our own, and that's their own. And so therefore back to the sun, back to Mars, and as a new face of Mars image the public's never seen. And therefore we are asked, surely no intelligent life could survive there. And he walks up and stands in front of it as he says that. But you will not be able to notice that unless you connect the script and follow it like a map to come out with my conclusion, which is proof evident. So on the facesofmars.com, you can see the scene yourself. And know that we're being given intelligence, and it's important because there's a sunset. It's called the Cydonia because it's UFO diaries called Cydonia. So the code of Cydonia isn't what Hoagland really speaks about on the surface, and you see the little lined maps and all that. That's really representing the UFO diary Cydonia sunset, because the position of the sun looks like it's a sunset because the table that's above it with pillows is clouds, and that's supposed to represent the sun going down. That's why I said there's something very important, and it was very crucial, Johnny, in the symbology. This is what I want to talk about years ago with Mr. Jordan Maxwell, but he was going through stuff, and he didn't want to get into this battle. Because of the symbolism which I was discovering at that time, it wasn't only scaring me, okay, but it was revealing itself to me, into which, okay, now we got something solid. We have a working model. We have a mathematical problem. We have an alien artifact. What else do we need? The alien artifact is the image, the intelligence that belongs to intelligence that put it there. Aha, get it? Intelligence that put it there. Obviously, this was filmed in a Masonic lodge. So therefore, these Masons, they own that image. Therefore, they own the space race. Therefore, they own you, Hoagland. And therefore, this is not a coincidence that this is being talked about or connected here right now with Jonny Enoch. And only in time will they become aware of the relevance of what I'm saying now through time. That's incredible. Now, again, go ahead, sir. But I had to, forgive me, I had to throw that out there because it's very crucial for tonight.
Yeah, it's a strange world out there, I tell you. There's all sorts of things going on, and at the end of the day, all we can do is, I guess do our best to get by and to change the world through random acts of kindness, move through our heart to show kindness, compassion, and love, and do our very best to make a difference, because out there, that's the way that we could really start to open up into new realities. And I believe that once we do that, we're going to unlock greater abilities in ourselves that are going to allow us to see these things.
And they'll help you. They will help you, especially if they see you and you're earnest. Remember, people believe in scriptures. How does God know the heart? How does God know the heart? Because he knows them. Therefore, okay, how can you believe that these ETs or whatever they are would not be able to do the same, malevolent or benevolent? Again, the spirit of powers and principalities of the air is supposedly the enemy who rules this world at the moment. At least scripturally, either way, he's a cosmic enemy. 30% of the cosmos sided with him, not just on Earth, but for some reason, Earth is going to be a focal point of that battle. Now, do you see anything in the old lores or anything from the past that might attest to that being a possibility?
Do I see anything in the old wars, you say, that's going to test the possibility of that?
That could be the possibility of actually fulfilling, well, what King Holy B. Jesus said in the Enemy of the Air, the devil battle thing, and why Earth would be the central focus.
Well, I think that Earth is the central focus because that's where we are. But, I mean, there's all sorts of strange stuff going on in this universe and in the multiverse right now as we speak. I mean, constantly. We are not being told about any of the things that are going on really out there. And we're being told about very, very little. We don't know anything. Most of us are so left in the dark, distracted with all the football games, the hockey games, the Kardashians, our Instagram feeds, that we really are kept uninformed, ignorant, and, in the dark about it all. So at the end of the day, what really do we know? And I do want to say that everything that we've gone through on this planet that we've led up to, every sort of great civilization that has fallen and then risen again like the phoenix from the ashes. None of that.
There's nothing new under the sun, I think you were going to lead us to, right?
That's right, but it's not a coincidence. Right. It's not a coincidence, though, either. There's a hidden hand that's guiding humanity.
and therefore you too. And you're, and I attest to that because some hand is guiding me, and I've met them. Now, granted, that's where hypnotherapy might come in. And that's where all this is possible, why I'm even here. I'm the man Martian. So continue to think that, people. But the reality is that we're going to secure this future on this timeline. It wouldn't matter because this is my life, and it was my life, depending on how you look at it. And it's my life to where things are going now. And I feel, after what I've been through, I feel blessed in a way. But I'm very John Connerly aware and awake. And that has something to do also with this path we're on and why we're here now. And the benefit of why Jonny Enoch's here, too. Nothing's coincidence. Jeff on Google Plus asked, is there any explanation of why the pyramids exist? And why is it that the Star of Moloch is being seen more and more throughout the world? Can you explain the significance of Moloch and Mars, if any?
Well, I'll take the question about the pyramid. For the Great Pyramid, I believe that it's a technology. And when we look at the work of the great Chris Dunn has something called the Giza. He's got a book and a theory called the Giza Power Plant, where he's looked at the pyramid being built like a Faraday cage. When you look,
I got to get him as a guest. He would be an awesome guest.
Oh, he's amazing, Chris Dunn. But he's looked at the idea that we see these various layers of when we see limestone, when we see granite. We see sandstone. We see everything put together. When you go inside the Great Pyramid, and I've explored it up and down. I've been down into the subterranean chambers, the Queen's chambers, the King's chamber. When you're there, you feel like you're almost lightheaded.
I was just going to say, did you have any feelings?
Well, it's very interesting because we know Napoleon, when Napoleon went inside of the Great Pyramid, he came out white as a ghost after because he had an out-of-body experience. He saw his Waterloo. He saw his demise.
Thus your John Carter reference earlier. That's amazing connection. Nice.
Yeah, so it's very interesting when he went there what happened. I mean, when we were up at our group, when we were up at the Great Pyramid last, and we're going again in March, it's interesting when you're there and you're chanting or whatever people are going through, they're having these altered states of consciousness. They're leaving the body. They're feeling very strange. It's because the entire Giza Plateau has been artificially leveled. Underneath the Giza Plateau, there's the Osiris shafts. There's these little portals that have been drilled at the top of the plateau to gather up water. And how it would gather, it's very much like a power plant, but it's also somewhat of a star portal. I believe it's almost like. I believe it has interdimensional capabilities or technologies to be like a consciousness transferring device. I'm not sure what's going on there on so many levels. It's eloquent in its simplicity. It's mathematically amazing. I mean, the whole thing is it's timeless sermon in the stone. The Great Pyramid is absolutely incredible. As for the other question, what was the question about Moloch, you said?
Yeah, why is it that the Star of Moloch is being seen more and more throughout the world? And can you explain the significance of Moloch and Mars, if any, I had?
Well, I believe that's probably your territory because, I mean, you are the man Martian.
Yeah, but Moloch, well, yeah. But still, like I said,
there's a lot more. There's a lot more coming visible to us now. We're learning about all sorts of different anomalies and things that are coming apparent to us. I think that's a question for Jordan
Maxwell. Jordan Maxwell's very familiar of Moloch and symbols and all that of Moloch, I believe. So that would be a question to re-ask once we get him on the show again.
There you go.
So, but all right, let me go to this. Corey on Facebook asked, what is NASA? Why? Oh, this is a good question. I'm answering this, believe me. But I won't answer them, but you could tonight on this show. But I am going to answer you. But why does NASA continue to dismiss these remarkable anomalies being seen on Mars as a trick of light? And I add, and shadow. Don't forget. Trick of light and shadow. And again, Jordan Maxwell could appreciate that term. I think he would get, we could get nice discussion when he's on again of that too. Go ahead, sir.
Well, with NASA, you know what they say? It stands for never a straight answer.
Or not a science agency.
Yeah, so, when you look over at the strange history it has, going back into Jack Parsons and everything, I mean, it's a strange history, the whole get-up. But, I mean, none of these places None of these places are going to tell you the truth. If you want to know the truth, you got to go find it out yourself. Start asking questions, people out there. Learn how to do remote viewing. Really start to look for the evidence like you guys are doing. You're going to find it for yourself, but you're not going to find it from these mainstream sources. Their entire job is to suppress the data so that it goes along with academia, the mainstream ideas, sort of like the Smithsonian. You're not going to get it from these places. You got to get it yourself.
Right, and that's the sad reality. And is there a bigger agenda of why that actually is, rather than fear to break the status quo? It seems it's being suppressed by a higher intelligence, possibly. Again, the powers of the principalities of the air, powers of the air, and again, the broadcast, everything. It's very interesting. The invisible. What'd you call him earlier? Demon King or something? The Invisible Demon King or something?
Yes, there was an invisible ruler of the Atlanteans with Tetfahat, and we were talking about the principalities and powers of darkness in higher places. It's referred
now,
to.
Were they attributed to the serpent as well?
Well, this is the thing, is that the serpent isn't what people think it is.
Right.
It's not necessarily an evil thing, this serpentine energy. In the Bible, it says, in Genesis, it talks about the tribe of Dan with the Danites.
It's an enemy to the God of the Bible, obviously. That's what I got from that story. A symbol, whether it's a symbol or an individual, I think, like you, it's more symbolic, because they're all over the planet, represented as serpents, right? But why serpents? Okay.
Right. Well, the serpent, like we were saying, the serpent is a type of an energy, or as Daryl has pointed out, it's a type of a knowledge of wisdom as well. It says, to be wise as serpents and as gentle as doves. So the idea is that with the tribe of Dan in the Bible, the tribe of Dan, it says in Genesis, if you go look this up, it says that they were moving along the serpentine migration path. It said the adder was biting at their heels. So what does that mean? When you talk to Brian Forrester, he'll tell you that the message of Viracocha is that Viracocha is actually the serpentine geomagnetic energy ley lines where the temples had to be built along on the earth. And actually, it's interesting, when the cataclysms took place and the solar storms hit the earth, if you look at places like Tanis in Egypt, across the street from Tanis, you'll see agricultural land that's lush and green, but at Tanis, it's burnt to a crisp, but you can't grow anything there. The soil is like decimated. Something hit it. It's just like it was nuked. Okay, so all the temples were just blown up. They were destroyed. Like something moved along them with earthquakes and geomagnetic energy, electricity just bam.
And it wasn't a flood, and it wasn't a flood per se, because floods don't burn.
That's right. Now look over when you see where Stonehenge is. Look at Stonehenge, Avebury. There's 900 megalithic henges that travel up a pathway all the way to Nabta Playa up in Egypt. Why are they moving along a certain pathway? There's a certain geomagnetic electrical energy pathway that goes along the earth, and that's where temples and portals and all that really cool stuff is all activated. This is the serpentine path. The serpent is what the energy was moving in. The serpent gods understood the serpent was the Kundalini energy as well, that would move up the spine, become activated up the 33 vertebrae, and then after it was activated out the pineal. That's why the king, when you see the Egyptian king, had the serpent upon the headdress.
Right, exactly. That makes a lot of sense too. There's still questions coming in. Wow. Daryl, how good are we on time? Is it strict tonight? And what's your time, my friend?
We have overtime. Let it go.
Mr. Enoch, how do you feel about that? Because I think you were adamant on the time you wanted. I know this is wasting time, but I had to ask.
I have until midnight my time, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen out there. If you have your questions, get them in and let's hammer these out.
All right, now how long is midnight your time from now?
It's 11:48 my time right now.
Oh, okay, so we got 15 minutes. Yeah, or anyone that wants to call in, wants to talk to Mr. Jonny Enoch here, 202-559-7943. That's 202-559-7943. And that is the timeline to the Martian revelation. But in the meantime, Kathy on Facebook asks, do you think that with the discovery of the Martian hidden lake, do you believe that there could be life in it?
Of course. There's life everywhere. Life is abundant in the universe. The blueprint of life exists all over the place. Look at our own Earth. Rupert Sheldrake talks about something called the morphogenic field, which is this electromagnetic field around the Earth that shapes and molds life. Astrobiologists say that the forests on our Earth are very similar to the forests of probably in other solar systems. There's all sorts of bacteria and all sorts of activity going on the face
universal aspects, as it was, like Dr. Beale says, that life is universal. So would those type of things be. That makes sense. And Grace on Twitter asked, with the thought of the first belief of moon worship, why don't the esoteric researchers dwell into the moon goddesses and gods when talking about Mars? Does your guest know of any moon worshippers, gods or goddesses, connections to Mars or Venus? Actually, that's a good question. Because again, that would attribute, if the Anunnaki story is true, it was a way world.
If you look at the seven ancient wonders of the world, the seven ancient wonders of the world actually talk about that, because the seven modern wonders of the world are nonsense. They're not based on anything, but the seven ancient wonders of the world were actually based on something. If you even look at, like, let's say Mercury was...
That was just structures that were able to be seen from the past, and now what, the pyramids are amongst the last, I think? Or is the last?
Right. The Great Pyramid was one, and the Great Pyramid represented Mercury. But, there was the Lighthouse of Pharos, all that sort of stuff. But the moon was represented, in all likelihood, by Artemis or Diana. We look over at Ephesus, the holy city of Ephesus in Turkey near Kushadasi. So most certainly the moon was represented. And we do have the idea of Venus was very, very significant. Actually, it's very interesting that people might not know this. The question, when we attribute that over to Venus, we attribute it over to Mars. Of course, there's a connection there to Mars as well. But when we see Venus... there is actually an idea that Venus was attributed to being like a crescent in the ancient world. And I don't know if you know this, but there's a very significant...
Very specific... Venus had a crescent too, huh? Not just the moon.
Well, do you know the story? Do you know the story about the croissant? Like why we eat the croissant?
No, but obviously, I'm telling you, it's like guys like a young Jordan Maxwell, man. Go ahead.
Well, you know what? We all got to just keep asking these questions. We all got to dig in deeper, because we're all going to be putting the cosmic puzzle pieces together one at a time. You got a piece.
I agree.
Maxwell's a piece. We all have a piece. But anyhow, this is very interesting. The year is 1683 in Vienna, Austria. And there was these invaders coming in from there was Islamic invaders coming from the Ottoman Empire. And when they come in, they were defeated when they were able to back them out of there. And they made this particular pastry at the time that became the croissant, that when you see it, that's why it's in the crescent shape. That's just like the flag for the Ottoman Empire. And I don't know if you've seen this before. When you go into any of these countries...
So it used to be, in a way, a patriotic thing, turned to a religious thing, and then something to which people don't even, they even forget about those origins. And the thing continues throughout generations.
A lot of people incorrectly assume that.
Well, right.
They incorrectly assume that when we see that over when you looked at the Ottoman Empire, you look over at over at Turkey.
Right, there's only a croissant. What does that have to do with the Islamists? Didn't they gobble it down?
They incorrectly assumed that the symbol there that you're looking at is actually the moon, but it's actually when we see over there with the crescent and the scimitar that it actually is representative over at Venus, because basically their holy day is when you look over it, it's Friday, and Friday is when you look at in the French from Monday to Friday, it's lundi, mardi, mercredi, jeudi, vendredi. Vendredi is Venus Day. Okay, so when we see that, the color of Venus is also green. So why are all the colors green associated with this as well? And it's going back into the Ottoman Empire. It's connected. There's a Venetian
that makes
connection.
Sense, actually.
Venus is it's very, very ancient and symbolic. Did you know that Joseph Smith, the founder of the Mormon Church, believed that there was intelligent life on Venus? And that came to Earth. The ancient teachings of the esoteric world believe that we had stuff like bees and bananas that came from Venus. All kinds of teachings that we see. Venus is very significant.
And why don't we hear about any missions or major publicity about Venus? That is really interesting.
Look at Val the Venetian. Look at all the interesting Venetian connections to extraterrestrials. It's a very interesting story there.
Definitely. And obviously we're running out of time, but Green asked, do you have any info about the ruins, I think potentially Egyptian, in the Grand Canyon during the 1900s?
That's very interesting.
Where I heard from other sources that Shems were stored.
Yeah, that's very interesting to me because I know there's all kinds of different petroglyphs and things like that in those areas, and there's been talk of that there was Egyptian artifacts and things that were destroyed. When we look at what the Smithsonian was covering up allegedly, I believe they were very much there, and it's actually something that I've wanted to investigate. I've been into those parts. I'm very fascinated by that story, and actually I've talked to someone about putting together some resources to actually have a serious look at that. I believe that there's something to that from what I've been told. I believe that's very true.
Yes, if you please continue to follow up with that because it's very important. Because I've heard stories, and by a certain, I'll just say it, Unit Sword, regardless whatever people that are aware of it think or not, he stated that even the military, is in control of it, but not just the military. Just, you could say the black budgeters and the black ops, as it was, space weapons, operational and development, whatever. The secret space programs are in charge of it, and they claim that there's a couple Shems in there, and these Shems would be more like arcs.
You mean like what Zechariah Sitchin called
arcs.
Shem, like a spaceship, like he was referring to the Tower of Babel?
Yes, and well, there you go, right? Like exactly, or arc, ship, craft, that could house people or something. I don't know if that's obviously it might be in left field for you, but I just find it interesting. Even caves and these things inside or military op units or not. It's very fascinating work to go to explore. So hopefully you do, and definitely come back on the show and speak with us about that and or video. We'd love to see that too. Is there anything you'd like to get out though? Thank you again for staying so long, sir. Hopefully the next time we'll do a longer show and Mr. Maxwell joining us.
Well, I appreciate you having me on your show. That was great of you. Please check out my website, as you mentioned, www.metaphysicalsource.com to everybody out there, or follow me on Twitter, Jonny Enoch, or check me out on Facebook. I'm always posting new finds and videos. But most certainly, I think I'm most active on YouTube at Metaphysical Source. That was great of you to have me on. It was a fun conversation. And, keep doing what you're doing, being that Martian investigator, because there's got to be life on Mars out there, and if there isn't, we got to go there.
Well, alluding to what I was trying to say earlier and how I opened the show, let's just say Mad Martian is also more of a unfortunate reality. That's part of the bigger puzzle of the Martian revelation and what my place in destiny is, and why I experienced the things I have as well as my mother when I was in her womb before I was born, and throughout all my life, and especially throughout the early 2000s when I thought it was of my own steps and volition to create the Martian revelation. That was guiding me to type, to get a computer. That was guiding me to see that face of Cydonia, because the day I got online was the day it just happened, and the computer was the day it just happened. The 98 release of the face was given, and it was from that and studying that, and then whammo and everything else. Again, the experiences. Again, I'm just laying out little seeds now for you to understand, sir, that we're already here. And just take it however you want it. But I thank you very much for being on, and hopefully, after all that, you're still willing to come back with Mr. Maxwell and let us get more into these issues. And again, thanks a lot for being on, and the listeners will surely check you out. And, please pump the show. And also, please support the Dr. Gil Levin's Martian Revelation Life Validation Campaign petition once we do it again. And we will do it again. Time is running out, but we need all the help, sir, I'm going to admit, that I can get. It's a little embarrassing, but not. But at least I have the balls to step forth and do what all these others that get money for and stuff to do to lead them to the truth, they don't do themselves or even support. How dare they, or how dare me? How mad am I? How mad should I be? Again, good night, sir, and thank you very much for being on. You rock.
You rock, too. Thanks for having me on. You guys have an awesome night, and like I said, I hope that we get to explore Mars and bring more of that Martian flow into the world. Talk to you soon.
All right, guys. Thank you, Johnny. Mr. Jonny Enoch there. Yes, indeed. He definitely earned his wings tonight on this show, huh? What do you think, Daryl?
Oh, yeah. He was on fire.
You know, hopefully, he might have had it somewhere else. He might have wanted to steer. I don't know, but we're all over the place. But it was pretty consistent because the segue do a lot of stuff that he went over, right?
That's right, and you got a lot of extra knowledge that you needed too. But Gary, we got 30 seconds, so give everybody a good night. Because
all right, buddy. All right, everyone. Thanks a lot, Daryl, and everyone. All I got to say is the Martian revelation's upon us, and it connects to this planet more ways than one to bring so many earthly revelations. So stand up, get ready, as I'm going to start a revolution. That's right. And it's coming, and get ready for next week's show, as we'll surely start a revolution. It's going to be a huge show, and hopefully a beginning of many great things to come for all the parties involved. Till then, may the Martians be with you in the Martian Revelation.